Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas, and I am the host of this particular program. Guys, let me know if you can hear me all right. I'm trying something new with the software, and I'm hoping that this effectively works. And I'm hoping this works better, especially from the context of interviews. Can you hear me, James? Are you hearing me loud and clear? I want to make sure that this is working correctly before I begin. Good, sounds good. Yeah, I've made a few changes to the software. I've realized that when OBS is operating, that OBS and StreamYard are operating simultaneously, and killing the volume in one doesn't necessarily kill the volume in the other one, which is what my mom basically told me yesterday when we talked. She was like, "We can hear you drinking coffee and whatnot." I was like, "What? No way." Also, when I did the interview with Mark, at the end, Mark was trying to give a comment, and I realized I couldn't hear him, but he showed out in the audience, meaning you guys can hear what was taking place, regardless of whether or not I had the mic off on OBS. Learning experience. Jed from Australia. Thank you for joining, Jed. You know, I've been to Sydney, Australia, a beautiful, beautiful country, especially Sydney. It's like you can get calamari, like you can get french fries here in the United States. Great food, great people, a bit forward, a little abrasive for some American tendencies. Beautiful country. I loved Australia. Absolutely loved it. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Look, if you guys really dig this show and you find yourself coming back here often, give it a like, share the content. Not just share, subscribe to the content, hit the notification bell also. That way you will be alerted when I pop in on the scene. Next week on Monday, Lawrence Whitaker. Whitaker, that's correct. Colin Powell's former chief of staff, he is going to be on the show. That man has been phenomenal. I followed him for years, and he has been a great voice on the issue of the American orthodoxy and how that orthodoxy needs to change. Glenn Deason is going to be on the show later today at 2 p.m. Definitely check him out. He is fantastic. And I've been trying to get him for a while, and I bugged the hell out of him for over a week. And he's going to be on the show today. So it should be damn good show. Also, if you guys really find that you dig the content, consider giving through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats or Super Sticker, whatever you prefer to call them. All chats will be read, providing they're not sexist, racist, or bigoted. Even if you want to take the piss out of me, feel free to do so. All of it assists and helps the show, and I appreciate you for assisting in any way you can, even if it's just hitting the like button. Interesting thing has been taking place since Democrats have lost this election. Very interesting. Now, what I hoped would be that they sit down and they understand, okay, we lost. And we lost because we didn't attend to the needs of the working class. We lost because we went out searching for Republican votes as opposed to, getting our base out. But that's not really what they're doing. What they have decided to do was initially, we're going to blame Joe Biden. Joe Biden got out the race late. Joe Biden didn't get out the race early enough. Joe Biden should not have ran again, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this despite the fact that all of those same Democrats that are now blaming Joe Biden at the time were like, Joe Biden is great. Joe Biden is competent. Joe Biden is, he has his hard sex with his wife every other day. Joe Biden is just on it. Anytime we're in those meetings, he's just, bam. He's not the guy that we saw in the debates. He is the person who's in charge. He's a leader. And now they're like, Joe Biden shouldn't have gotten out the race. He stayed in the race too long. He damaged Kamala Harris's chances. And as I pointed out once before, even if Joe Biden got out the race early, there is no guarantee that Kamala Harris would have been the choice. Meaning, Joe Biden could have gotten out the race earlier, and you could have had a situation where someone else who was stronger ends up winning in the primary. Even in the mini primary, you could have had a situation where somebody stronger won in the mini primary. Now, if they're making the argument that it shouldn't have been Kamala Harris, fair enough. Say that. But they're not saying that. They're effectively saying something to the effect of, well, Joe Biden should have got out of the race earlier. There would have been a longer time period for her to have a full campaign. And even worse, they're arguing Kamala Harris did nothing wrong. She ran a perfect campaign. She was utterly flawless. And adding to it, it was impossible for anybody to win under those terms, despite the fact, as I've shown over and over again, that Kamala Harris was effectively leading the overwhelming majority of this race. So for all of this talk of she had no chances, nonsense. She had chances. Kamala Harris decided to run around the country with Liz Cheney. Who do you think you are reaching when you're running around sitting beside Liz Cheney in one state after the next? So you get people, two responses. One, just utter spite. People like Joanne Reed, for example, saying stuff like this. Effectively, you Hispanics that didn't vote for Kamala Harris, well, you get what you got coming to you because you should have voted for Kamala Harris. This is
sisters and abuelas from here on in. However, we only have so much time for blame. We now need to make a plan. Deportations happen. Y'all voted with Stephen Miller and David Duke and against your own sisters and chose Kamala Harris with 60% of their votes. So you own everything that happens to your mixed status families.
So you own everything that happens to your mixed status families. Did you all hear that? Okay, I want to make sure you guys heard that correctly. Did y'all hear that? Okay. Yeah, it is cringe. Effectively saying anything that happens to you because you Hispanics voted for that, you own that. That's yours. So if your family members get deported, then you should own that because you voted for Donald Trump. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's utterly amazing. She's not alone in that. Let's go to Roland Martin. So Roland Martin follows this up. The Black Misleadership class, as he is called by the Black Agenda Report. Roland Martin has gone and said this. Well, let me find him. Yeah, right here. This is Roland Martin. Listen to what he is now saying. He is effectively blaming people because the Muslim community ended up voting predominantly for Jill Stein. Now, Hispanics voted in large measure for Donald Trump. Neither of these groups end up voting for Kamala Harris. Listen to what Roland Martin is saying. Black misleadership class. He is an utterly embarrassing human being. Listen to what he's saying.
So y'all can enjoy your win, but I'm telling you right now, a lot of you who voted for Trump and you're rejoicing right now.
You know what's funny about this? He looks like he's either been drinking or crying, and I can't tell which one. Is Roland Martin a drinker? Does he be hitting the bottle? I don't know if any of you know, if you guys know. Look at him. Look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. He's crazed. He's utterly crazed. He seems that he's been crying at home. All right, let's continue.
There will be tears. And when the tears come shedding, you can't cry on our shoulders. And you can't come to say, I don't know how this happened. And all we gonna say is, we tried to tell you.
All we gonna say is, we tried to tell you. Think about that. So this is just bitterness, right? This is, oh, our candidate lost. We tried to warn you. And so all of you groups that didn't, vote for Kamala Harris, then whatever you get, missing something very straightforward that they are blissfully, seemingly have a blind spot for. It is your candidate's job. It is her job to get those voters. It's not magic. It's not that people owe you their vote. It's not a situation where these people are just supposed to give fealty and allegiance to any random Democrat that comes out because, they're so terrified of the other candidate. It's not that. Your candidate needs to go out, make a pitch, and come up with a view of the world, a vision that they can give to the public for that public to back that candidate. It's not magic. It's the way it's been done in time memorial. But the Democratic Party has gotten to the point where they believe the Republican Party is so bad that we don't really need to offer anything real. We don't really need to give a vision. We can just point to how bad they are. And because of how bad they are, people should, inherently vote for us, even when we don't offer anything real. So everybody else should accept the failings, the weakness, the impotence of the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party is just bad. And if people don't see how bad that Republican Party is and don't just vote for the Democrat despite not offering anything, then you get what you get. We're blameless in this process. You're not blameless in this process, bro. Your candidate's job is to get people. If she failed to do that, then that's her fault. It's not the voters' fault. It's not the people who voted for Trump. It's not the people who voted for Jill Stein. It's not the people who stayed home. It is your candidate's fault. It is your party's fault. And until you accept that fault and that blame and turn it around and say, okay, we need to do something different. It's kind of like alcoholic, right? Like Roland Martin would know. When an alcoholic goes to AA meetings and they're sitting in the meeting and they tell them, the first thing they say, my name is so-and-so and I am an alcoholic. And the reason they have them say that right off the bat is because what they're trying to get across is, I have a problem. You can't change until you acknowledge the fact that you have a problem. It's that. Which is why all of this stuff coming out of the Democratic Party right now, the soul searching, is not necessarily really getting to the root of the matter, that the Democratic Party has fundamentally failed, A, the working class, and B, lost track of that working class. And this is the party of unions. This is the party of the working class at one point during the 80s. Somewhere along the way, you've lost the thread. And in losing the thread, you've lost the ability to connect, to talk to, or for that matter, be a worthwhile vessel for the will of the American public in any way that is real, legitimate, and tangible. And that American public either A, stayed home, B, voted for Jill Stein, or C, voted for Trump to send a message. They're sick of the way things are currently run. And your party was representative of the establishment. And the establishment fundamentally not just failed, but because they failed, they lost. Roland Martin doesn't want to deal with that. Joanne Reed doesn't want to deal with that. And instead, they're spiteful, angry at people who didn't vote for their candidate. I would say you should look in the mirror and stop blaming everyone else. I want to bring in my guests. We are joined, there we are. We're joined with Nebojsa Malic. Nebojsa Malic is a Serbian-American journalist, blogger, and translator who wrote a regular column for antiwar.com from 2000 to 2015 and is now a senior writer at RT. Nebojsa, Neb, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly well. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Good morning. Was a senior writer at RT. Sorry.
I'm sorry. You're right. Everybody, we've all lost our jobs. I'm sorry. What are you doing now, by the way?
Well, I'm here in Belgrade, Serbia.
Okay.
Still doing journalism, doing a lot of on-air punditry. It's been a busy week
Yes.
after the election. Everybody wanted to know what's going on in the U.S. So I'm a bit of an America explainer. I got to host a little YouTube and TikTok show in Serbian explaining America to people. It's a living.
Let me ask the audience, can you guys hear him okay? I want to make sure the sound is all right. I've made an adjustment to my system. I want to make sure that people can hear and everything else, that there's no weirdness before we get into the interview. I want to cut this clip. I want to make sure you get a good showing and nobody is responding. Why is nobody responding? Okay, let's start. I'm going to assume that everything is going well since I can hear you well, and I'm assuming that they can hear you well. Let's start at the beginning. The U.S. elections, as you say, you've been busy. You've been explaining American to the rest of Serbia, or for that matter, the rest of Europe. What's your take on Donald Trump's win? I'm pretty sure you could hear me complaining about some of the stuff that people are saying. Basically, you get what you deserve. You should have voted for Kamala, despite the fact that Kamala wasn't really offering anything. that type of argument, that type of rhetoric. What do you make of Donald Trump winning? Why do you think he won this race?
Well, I mean, just listen to what people say, why they voted for him. Most of the people interviewed, I actually was kind of surprised that AOC did a poll of her voters and followers who either voted for her and then Trump, or voted for Trump and then some other down ballot Democrat. And she seemed like she seriously wanted to know why, which is a first. And most of the people in the responses were like, yeah, I lived better under Trump. I want the standard of living to be better again. Things were objectively bad under Biden and Harris. And most people, most voters, as they should, don't really give a flying rodent's posterior for highfalutin politics. They want to be able to afford groceries and rent and car insurance and healthcare. Those are things that matter. Hopefully in that order. And so if they aren't able to do that, then things are objectively bad. Now, who are they going to go for? Somebody who says, okay, things are bad, I promise to fix them. Or somebody who's saying, oh no, things are great. You're just too stupid to understand this. Now vote for me because that's your place in life. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the latter is a bit insulting to people's intelligence, doesn't it? Isn't it? I mean,
It's just arrogant. It's just arrogant.
Very.
Yeah. It's smug and arrogant. And, they do that all the time. I realized when I was a lefty and during the Bernie Sanders thing, and I worked at this company, I was the only Bernie Sanders supporter. Everybody else was like a Clinton supporter. And I remember this level of smugness of like, oh, Sanders can never win. Hillary Clinton is clearly going to win this race. Obama did everything right. Or you hear the people like Sam Cedar, where he would have these arguments where it's like, well, obviously you should go for the least worst. And, you kind of point out, it's like, but if it's continually least worst, like, where does that go? Like, meaning you may start off, and I compare it to like one concentration camp less, where one party says, well, I'm going to build 2 concentration camps, and the other one says, I'm going to build 3. And so you vote for the guy with 2. And it's like, is that really what you want to vote for? And how far do you want to go with that? So next year, one party is building 5, and the next year that party built 4. And so you go for the 4? Like, meaning you're in this increasingly worse scenario where because one party is worse than the other, and you can just keep being least worse, that nothing fundamentally changes. And in fact, things keep fundamentally getting worse because of the way you continuously vote. Like, there's no standards built into the Democratic Party. It's just vote blue no matter who. And at a certain point, it's like, dude, this is not doing anything for me or for my life. And I don't see any tangible change to my life by voting for your political party. And I would argue that that's what this is. Yeah.
It's smugness and entitlement.
Yeah.
I remember back in 2020 when Biden was campaigning on the, I have a plan for the virus. Right. Anybody remember the virus? Or have we all repressed this? And he was like, yo, I have a plan to shut down the virus. He's shutting down the economy and I have a plan to shut down the virus. At the time where all of the states in the strictest shutdown were Biden's allies. Right? We remember that. And he comes to power and his plan to shut down the virus is to muzzle everybody up and mandate shots. The same shots that 90% of the people who backed him on social media were saying they would never take because that's the Trump vaccine and they'll never take the Trump vaccine. Now, am I crazy here or is this insane? That was his plan. And then the whole thing just went away the day the Ukraine war broke out. And the joke was that, Putin fixed COVID. It was a joke for the censors. That's a joke. That was the joke that was going around. But yeah, does anybody remember this, or did we just all repress? I mean,
yeah,
I'm sorry. But, and then when Kamala Harris comes out, and I couldn't believe when she said this, she went around. That was a big part of her platform for about a week. She was like, "He doesn't have a plan, and I have a plan." I'm like, no, lady, no, don't say you have a plan. That's a bad thing to say in this election because people still remember 4 years ago. People still remember where that last plan took them. That's a terrible platform. And what was her platform? Celebrities have endorsed me. Hi, P. Diddy. Like, who does that?
Yep. Well,
and then everybody's acting surprised when this happens.
Well, she spent $450,000 to put her face on the Las Vegas Sphere. She spent $100,000 or more than $100,000 to build a set for Call Me Daddy. She spent what, $15 million on entertainers like Lady Gaga, Katy Perry. Apparently, she sent money to Alanis Morissette, but that check bounced, so Alanis Morissette didn't show up. Like, and then you get Joanne Reed, who says like, this campaign was ran perfect. She did everything right. It was flawless. She said it is going to be difficult for a Black woman, especially, a woman, especially a woman of color. And then she says she even got an endorsement for Queen Latifah. And Queen Latifah doesn't endorse anybody. Like, as if that matters in the context of trying to win a race.
Look, I love Queen Latifah. I love her movies. I really do. I'm not just saying this. I'm a big fan. But it shouldn't matter in this country.
Right.
And by the way, that was $450,000 a day for the Sphere in Las Vegas. And guess what? Nevada still went to Trump.
Yeah.
That is like the worst money ever spent. And
another one, football players. And she put all of this money, like 6 figures a day, into football games. And again, those people voted for Trump. I mean, social media influencers, where she's putting money into people to say, hey, vote Kamala. And I don't even know if all of those people are revealing to their audience that they're getting money from Kamala Harris to tell them to vote for Kamala Harris. None of this stuff worked. In fact, to make that point clear, she lost the youth vote. Not lost it, but the youth vote was the least amount, as it was going all the way back to John Kerry. I said that very poorly. But basically, going all the way back to John Kerry, I got rid of the thing. But effectively, if you look at the youth vote going back in time, Kamala Harris, I think, had like 12%. John Kerry had 9%. Every other Democrat had like over 20%. So she even depressed that vote that she was trying to get by putting the money into social media. Just astonishing.
Well, you had those kids going on first about Biden and then about Kamala, like nothing had changed. And that by itself was phony and fake, and people can recognize phony and fake more often than not. And I mean, that in itself did, wonders for her reputation and theirs. I don't even remember those two crazy kids that were always gushing about how great Biden was and how great Kamala was afterward. And everybody was mocking them for taking money from the Democrats. And like, no, we're totally not paid. And then every community was like, you're run by this agency who's getting this much from the DNC. Come on. That sort of stuff. Like, I'm sorry, but if you need to pay people to say they like you, you're not authentic.
Yeah.
They're not authentic. And people can smell that.
Yeah. 1000% agree with you. Yeah, it's been wild. They are effectively now blaming Joe Biden. That's the other one. They're saying that Joe Biden should step down. They've come up with this plan of not just Joe Biden should step down, or Joe Biden should put Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court. And that's they're effectively saying that they need to get rid of Sotomayor, so Kamala Harris can take the bench. Like, and I remember I kept thinking to myself, she just lost on a massive effing level. Like, the American public effectively said, we don't want her as president. And their plan is, well, let's just make her president anyway and get rid of Joe Biden. And it's like, is this really where you guys are going after losing to a man that you call Hitler and a fascist, and that these people are Nazis and these people are garbage? And your next step is, hey, Joe Biden should step down and put Kamala Harris in. That'd be a big F you to Trump. Okay, dude, what do you think they're going after this? I mean, because it doesn't necessarily seem like they're accommodating this well. And maybe this is just the very beginning of them kind of reconciling a loss on this scale. I don't know. But where does the Democratic Party pivot after a loss like this? It's not like they have a coalition of moderates that, it's not like there's this hankering for the establishment that the Democratic Party represent. Where do you think the Democratic Party goes now?
Well, they're certainly in the early stages of the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief there. I think it's anger, denial, actually, and then anger. But they're sort of in a mess of their own making, because the ideological sort of field that they staked out for themselves is pretty barren and fallow right now. The transing kids thing is apparently not a big draw for voters. Who knew? supporting war all over the world. Not a big thing for voters. Who knew? Admittedly, not a big thing for any voters. I think foreign policy was something like 3%, 4% for Democrats and 3% for Republicans in exit polls. That's how much people cared about it. But those people who do care very strongly.
Uh-huh.
And then, having massive inflationary spending and, printing money out of thin air so that everything is more expensive, even though people don't necessarily instinctively understand this, a lot of people don't. That's also not a big voting draw. I mean, it's essentially their entire argument is vote for us because we're entitled to your vote and we
Yeah.
deserve to rule. And this election was a whole-scale repudiation of that. So ideally, in a normal country, people would sort of sit down, examine what they did wrong, say, okay, well, we screwed up. This message doesn't resonate with people. Let's, see what we actually believe in, what we actually intend, aim to do. And it's one of those parties should basically say, okay, this is our vision for the country. How can we communicate this to the voters? Or, this is what voters want from the country. How can we give it to them? What we're seeing time and again in modern America, though, is that, well, this is what we want to do. How do we propagandize people into supporting us doing that? Nobody's bothering to ask the people what they actually want. That's part of the problem. Democracy is supposed to be about listening to the people here. The ultimate form of consent of the governed that Jefferson wrote about all those, 240 some years ago. It was supposed to be 250, right? Almost, yeah. That anniversary is almost upon us, isn't it? In 26. I just realized. But yeah, it's so it's sort of an underlying axiom of American society, whether you believe it's a nation state or a proposition nation, whatever, that the government rests on the consent of the governed, which is why people tend to vote and why, theoretically, even the income tax is voluntary. It's not. If you don't file it, you go to jail, but you have to personally complete that submission ritual, because without it, it would be openly coercive. It's so voting is one of those soft ways of expressing consent of the governed. And if you don't have that consent, you don't have the mandate. And what we're seeing now is that Trump has the House, the Senate, the White House. He has he won the popular vote. He has a mandate. And if you can't recognize that, and if you can't deal with that, and you do some self-examination, like, what did we do wrong? Then all that's left is the smug sense of entitlement. And again, as I said, people can smell this. All the people can smell this.
What the Democratic Party is stuck in a fundamental contradiction in our electoral system that, for whatever reason, they've never done anything about in real terms. It is a party that's supposed to be on the left, meaning, this is supposed to be the party that deals with the rough edges of the capitalistic system. We're going to get healthcare. We're going to get education. We don't want people living on the street. We're the ones that pass Social Security. It's that type of logic. But then you're in a political system that requires money to win. I mean, Kamala Harris raised over $1 billion in that race. If you go back to the previous races with Hillary Clinton, she raised over $1 billion in the race. Obama raised well over $1 billion. And so it's like, okay, so who are you getting the money from? If 90% of the races are won by the side with the most cash, then your main thesis, your main argument, or the thing that you need the most is the cash. Meaning that's not even based on political ideology. It's who can raise the most money. And based on who raises the most money, that person has a better chance of winning. So if you're the Democratic Party and you need to go to all of these rich people for money, okay, well, how do you do both? How do you go to a rich person who has healthcare, who can afford it, who can afford education, who can afford to live in a nice house, and say, hey, I need to increase your taxes. I need to increase the amount of money that you're spending on your workers and increase the minimum wage and increase healthcare. They're going to tell you, we don't want that. We don't need that. We're going to vote for the Republican. So Democrats are in this kind of weird box of, A, we need to get money. We need to get it from the rich. And we need to come up with a plan that they would accept and the public would accept. And the reality of it is, any plan that you come up with is going to trend to the right. It has to trend to the right. And so you get these kind of milquetoast Democrats that can't necessarily come up with this kind of Sanders-esque vision, which I would argue is what the American public ultimately wants. Like, meaning they want somebody who gives a damn, who gives this thing of they're willing to go to the mat for me and they're fighting in my interests. And I would argue that the reason that the working class ended up voting for Trump predominantly is because they looked at it and said, A, he's a fighter. Even if you don't think he's fighting for you, he's fighting for something. The establishment hates him. They can't stand him. They write one report after the next going after him. He seems to be less antagonistic on the issue of foreign policy. I mean, if you remember, Trump kept saying they're going to get us into a third world war. They're going to get us into a third world war. And Kamala Harris derided him for even saying it. Her thing was like, oh, he's going to abandon Ukraine. And he was talking to dictators like Kim Jong-un. Well, maybe the public was okay with that. Looking at the foreign policy thing, they seem to be okay with that. It's almost as if there's an orthodoxy that the Democratic Party assumes that the public agrees with them on. And this election was like, we don't agree with you on this stuff. We don't agree with you on this stuff. We're not for this war in Ukraine. We're not for these wars. Cut this stuff out. I guess the catch becomes, do you think they're going to get it? And more to that point, I mean, let's go to Trump for a bit. What do you think of the people that Donald Trump has added? So up to this point, Donald Trump has chosen, well, he came out and said, well, I'm not going to get Nikki Haley and I'm not going to use Mike Pompeo. Okay. But then he turns around and brings on Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. I mean, this is just a hardcore neocon. Mike Waltz for National Security Advisor. Again, another neocon. He used to work with Dick Cheney or somebody, or George Bush. You get Elise Stefanik, another lunatic, especially on the issue of Israel, for the UN ambassador. So he doesn't want Nikki Haley. He doesn't want Mike Pompeo, but effectively gets Mike Pompeo Nikki Haley-esque. What do you think this means?
Well, have those actually been confirmed from his transition team, or have they? Because Rubio, last I checked, Rubio was like a rumor to the New York Post.
Rubio was confirmed. From my understanding, Rubio was confirmed. And as for Mike Waltz was confirmed. Elise Stefanik was confirmed. And Holman, or whatever the guy's name is, for the Board of Immigration. That guy's
right. He was the former ICE chief, if memory serves, and you know he's at least fit for the job, for what he said he wants to do. I mean, I'm dubious about the wisdom of pulling people from the House and the Senate after just winning the election and getting the House by a thread. Because I think they picked up a seat from their slimmest of slim majorities right now.
Majority,
yeah. And Stefanik is from New York. I mean, New York is a blue state. Democrats are going to have the entire war chest, such as it is, to throw against their candidate, against whoever's picked to replace her in a special election. This sounds like a recipe for losing the state of the House of Representatives. It sounds remarkably politically naive, not to mention stupid.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that the goal of this is, see, Donald Trump is weird, like his wild card. And it's hard to know what is exactly going on in his head and whether he even knows what's going on in his head, especially on this stuff. Donald Trump has this theory of escalating to de-escalate. Now, he did this with North Korea, if you remember, where he goes out, he calls him Rocket Man, he's attacking him left and right, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's meet, let's have a summit. Is that what's going on with this? This notion that I'm bringing in these hardcore neocons, but I'm still going to have a foreign policy that is not necessarily in a direction, or people are policy. And the people that you bring in, I think people are policy too. Yeah.
Here's the thing. That particular trick could only work once. Just like most card tricks or negotiating tricks, they only work once. Okay, fine, they only have to work once, but the problem is he used them up in the last term, and they ultimately didn't work because of the people like John Bolton and McMaster and Pence and all the other people that he appointed that were basically busy sharpening knives to stick into him on the first opportunity. And so it didn't work. And so now, and the worst part is for him that things have changed since then. 4 years have passed. The world has become a more dangerous place. We can argue why, but it has. And so he can't do this to Russia. There's no threat at this point that would work on Russia. They're prepared for a nuclear Armageddon. How do you trump that? There is no trump card, not even one named Donald J. Trump. You can't bluff these people. So what do? Maybe he's trying to do the whole, only Nixon can go to China, only neoconservatives can make world peace. But that would depend on messaging. See, that's a strategy that is calibrated for appeasing the American press. Well, the American press is irrelevant. He just nuked them from orbit. The 90% of the newspapers started surrendering before the election.
Yeah.
CNN is completely irrelevant, if not for the fact that it's holding people hostage at airports, that nobody would watch it. MSNBC, come on, give me a break. Even Fox News is irrelevant ever since they, self-inflicted a headshot by firing Tucker Carlson. I'm telling you, if this message is calculated to appease the media and sort of the ruling elite, it's unnecessary. He's already beaten them. He doesn't need to justify himself to them. He can literally do, in terms of policy, whatever he wants. This is the mandate he got. This is the second chance that he perhaps didn't deserve, but he got anyway.
Yeah.
And so to waste it by appointing neocons of limited cognitive ability and even more limited vision would be horrible. So honestly, I'm hoping those rumors are not true. And we'll. On the other hand, let's huff a bit of copium here. It wouldn't be the first time that Trump has appointed people and then had them fired within a week. Anybody remember Anthony Scaramucci?
Mm-hmm.
He's like the unit of shortness of political appointment in American politics. So, it's counterproductive, it's stupid, it's wasteful, but it's doable if need be. I'm just saying, personnel is policy. He has had a lot of support from people who didn't want these kinds of old, tired, expired opinions governing American policy. And so, why would he do that?
I gotta be honest. It's terrifying to me, to be bluntly honest with you. It's terrifying to me because, just so the audience can see, this is Rubio. This is the one that Trump is bringing for Secretary of State, which is, again, terrifying to me.
Vicious animals.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not. On the contrary.
Rubio,
are you filming it?
Wait,
I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. Hamas should stop building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000...
That is the lunatic that he is bringing on. I am terrified by that. The thing that worries me more than anything else is incompetence. It's this inability to kind of grasp the world as it is and use arrogance as opposed to intelligence in order to dictate things. Meaning, I am always concerned with ideological actors in the foreign policy sense. This is the Hitler thing, right? Oh, we're just going to go in and we're going to kick it in and the Soviets are just going to fall over. Okay, no, this is not going to happen. Or the Joe Biden thing, or we're just going to destroy the Russian economy and we're going to destroy the Russian military. Okay, again, that didn't happen. They have these ideas of the world, and Donald Trump is the same person with that stuff. This is, America can do X and Y. And the fact of the matter is, you are absolutely right. In Ukraine, we engaged Russia in the war that Russia always could fight, meaning we are in a land war with an army that has been honed, that has increased from 150,000 to nearly 1 million men that have been fighting and getting better at that fight over the course of these last couple of years or 3 years. And, like you said, what can they do? They don't have a land army in Europe that can beat the Russians. There's no European army out there that can beat the Russians. Ukraine had the best army in Europe, and they just got crushed through 3 different Ukrainian armies. And so it's like, so what are you going to do? And Putin's even made this point himself. Putin pointed out, he says, okay, you attack us, we attack your capitals. What is America going to do? Because basically what you're effectively saying is you can't beat us in a conventional war. The best that you can have is a nuclear conflict that nobody wins. And so Donald Trump is stuck in this box of either I accept this on Russian terms, I let it play out, or I go to nuclear war. None of those are great options. And if Trump doesn't recognize that and realize that, then we are in a world of hurt. Like honestly, and this runs the gambit. Whether it's in Iran, where again you can help Israel all you want. Iran has been preparing for a fight with the United States for decades. I mean, I had a conversation with Morandi, and he says, "Look, we're not concerned about Israel." He says, "We have been preparing to fight the United States for decades after they went after Iraq." He said, "This notion that 8 million people is going to somehow topple the Iranian government is nonsense." Like, we could be in a world of chaos with Trump. But by the same token, Trump is a wild card, and he could turn around and it's like, yeah, I'm going to make this deal with Ukraine. I don't care who I just hired. I'm going to make this deal. If you remember, he had Bolton, he had Pompeo, he had all of these lunatics in his administration. What did he want to do? Pull out of Afghanistan? He wanted to stop Obama's regime change war in Syria. He made deals with North Korea. And that's with Pompeo and Bolton in his administration.
But
So,
those people stopped him. That's the problem.
yeah,
Those
yeah,
people prevented him from seeing those plans come to fruition. Let me circle
you're
back
right.
to what we were talking about a second ago about the Democrats and their predicament.
Yeah,
Part of their
please.
predicament is that the biggest part of their predicament is that they built a party that is not representative of the American population, but appealed exclusively. They called it the high-low model. They're appealing to the top of the coastal liberal elites, the billionaires living in Manhattan penthouses and Hollywood mansions, and then basically, I'm not going to say the homeless, but like people without anything, like the lumpen proletariat of the Marxian terms. And nobody.
By the way, that's who voted for them, by the way. If you look at it, the lowest incomes and the highest incomes, you're absolutely right.
So people with something theoretically to gain because there's nothing to lose, and people who have everything and aren't bothered. I wish to say that way. It's a contradiction in terms, as you pointed out. And
Yeah.
so this is their internal contradiction going forward that they need to resolve somehow. Now, Trump's issue is that a lot of these America First, or Make America Great Again, people on his side believe that they want to make American empire great again.
Right.
And that's a contradiction in terms because the American empire is the mortal enemy of the American republic. If you have the empire is built on this notion that American economy should be financialized, that the country is a tax farm, that the people who live there can be looked down on with hatred and contempt, and that there is no spot for the little guy in Pittsburgh or Dayton or Springfield in that particular globalist vision. None.
But see, that goes against what Trump was saying, though. If you remember, like their argument was globalism is a problem. We're going to fight the globalists. I mean, even the language that is like people who are voting for Trump uses yeah.
Right. But that's the thing. He was talking the talk of let's restore the republic and let the empire, dispense with the empire. And that is the way to go. It can and should be done by all means, because the American empire is not an asset. It's a liability. It's an albatross around the neck of the republic. To make America great again, one must dispense with the American empire. It is simply that. That's true. It's one of those, there's a sun in the sky. It's just a fact. And yet you have all of these people who are like, no, we must have the biggest military. Why? No. First of all, you don't. Second of all, it's a huge drag on resources. You can't afford the biggest military.
Right.
And rebuilding it is going to take years no matter what happens. So let's assume you want to rebuild it. You need to find a way to rebuild it on the cheap and not waste it in wars. You have to stop fighting wars right now. So that's one. Two, you can't afford to bribe people around the world into being your friends, allies, right? You can't do that anymore. You have to be smart. You have to do trade deals. You have to revitalize domestic industry. That's a process that's going to take years. That's a process that's going to have to go longer than the Trump administration if there is to be anything done about it. It can't happen overnight. Too many structural supports have been removed. And so you have to, there's no money, there's no energy, there's no room for imperialism if you want to rebuild America. And I thought up until this Rubio rumor that the impending White House would understand this, and that's the talk that Trump was talking. That's what J.D. Vance was saying. That's what a lot of Tulsi and Bobby Kennedy and Tucker and all these other people around him who I'm not with first name basis, but that's the thing that they were telling him. And now, now it's like, Rubio, what? Why?
Yeah.
It's insane. It makes no sense. And this is a problem of echo chambers. People who are out of touch because they're getting bad inputs. Now, I'm a little more optimistic about Republicans getting back on track because at least they have the instant backlash on Twitter or X or however we want to call it that can theoretically reach them, and they have that feedback loop at least established. Elon Musk can be easily persuaded, not because he's gullible, but because he's reasonable. He sees 3 or 4 arguments on X from people that he reads and says, okay, this is an interesting point, and then he kicks it upstairs. Democrats don't have that feedback mechanism because they go to the Washington Post or MSNBC, which tells them what they think they want to hear, and so they live in their own delusions. That's part of their problem. But it seems like Republicans, especially in foreign policy, are deeply delusional as well, and this needs to be broken right away if they're going to make any headway whatsoever. You cannot have the empire and the republic. You can't make America great again while having the American empire sitting on your neck. You just can't do it. It can't happen.
They don't know that. And that's the thing that terrifies me, because you're absolutely right. Like, you can't do both. That's the rub. It's like you're $35 trillion in debt, and you're spending like $2 trillion a year. It never comes up. It's like it just doesn't matter. And there was a conversation that Putin was having. I don't even remember where he was having this. This was recently. And he was talking about the dollar as a reserve currency. And he pointed out it's a strategic asset. He was like, America spent, I think he said, like $10 trillion over the course of the last few years. And he was like, how the hell does a country do that? He says the only reason they can do that is because they're reserve currency. And if you think about it, he's kind of right. Like, in no other country could say, I'm just going to spend $10 trillion. Screw it. I'm going to make it out of thin air. It's not backed by anything except for the American military. No country could do that. Like, think of what you could spend, what you can buy, what you can make. You can make any armament that you want. You can invest in any country that you want. You can invest in knocking countries over, because at that point, your budget is whatever you want your budget to be. It's like fudging. It's not real money. And so his point is, yeah, that needs to stop. That's a problem. Hence, BRICS. Hence, we find a way to get around the dollar. We need to stop using it. This is something that is against our own self-interest, be it Russia or some of the countries that's aligned with Russia, meaning they have used it as a weapon for so long that other countries have now decided, okay, this needs to stop. That is a weapon, and that is a weapon that they can use to buy stuff, or for that matter, undercut other governments. No, you're absolutely right. I don't know if Trump, that's what I mean. I always said Trump is one of the dumbest people alive. I say that and deride him on that because I don't think he fully understands, A, how the world is organized, A, against us for one, but B, a point of view that is not built on hubris and ideology. I don't think he has that in him, nor do I think the people around him have it in him. Every so often I would hear J.D. Vance say something where I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Or I would hear somebody around him say something like, okay, fair enough. That makes sense. That's sensible. I don't know what he is going to do. And like I said, I am trying not, I consider him a wild card. I'm trying not to take the position that, okay, Donald Trump completely lied about the foreign policy stuff, because again, his previous administration went somewhat back and forth. I don't know. I mean, it's like it is an open question to me at this point.
Well, to be entirely fair to him, he's one of the rare, if only maybe the only politician who's actually recognized that the role of the dollar as a reserve currency. He gave a speech, I believe, at the Economic Club in New York. I'm butchering that, but he did mention, the dollar. We cannot survive if the dollar stops being the world's reserve currency. We can't.
And by the way, he's right.
Afford. Yeah, and he's the only one who's ever said that.
Yeah.
So on that, in that respect, I'm inclined to believe he's not an idiot, because he gets.
Isn't it weird that the Democrats never bring that up? Like, you literally have the BRICS organization with overwhelming majority of the world, like more than half of the world represented at the BRICS summit. You have all of these countries, including Turkey, trying to get into BRICS. Turkey, being a NATO power, is like, yeah, sure, let's get into BRICS. I want to do that. Let's do that. You have the overwhelming majority of the world wanting to get into this organization. And one of the primary pillars of that organization is, how do we find a way to not use the dollar? And the Democratic Party doesn't bring it up, doesn't seem to be part of their modus operandi. I mean, Obama initially brought it up with the TPP, but the TPP was this kind of corporate takeover, this corporate overthrow of state government, of nationality, of national sovereignty. Meaning the way Obama was trying to deal with it was basically screwing over the American public to give it over to corporate interests. That's not what BRICS is doing. BRICS is in fact doing the opposite. It's this notion of we're going to deal with each other as equals. We're not going to have the sanction nonsense. There's no such thing as a hegemony in this process, et cetera. Meaning they're going with this notion of national sovereignty as being a pillar of their engagement with one another, where Obama was basically trying to use a corporate overthrow of America. Like, it's astonishing, like the parallels that are taking place in regards to the world stage. It's very weird.
Well, the one thing that, you know, both Trump and the Democrats are guilty of is destroying the reliability, the reputation of the dollar through sanctions.
Right.
Because of what happened to Venezuela, Trump's team, what was it, Bolton and Abrams, were ones who led this whole legitimate President Juan Guaido, or whatever his name was, thing in 2019 that turned out to be a complete fiasco.
Yeah.
But because it's Venezuela, it's just one country. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have a certain reputation in the world. They figured they could get away with it.
Yeah.
And they reimposed sanctions on Iran. They basically went back on the deal that was multilateral and negotiated with all of the other world powers, which destroyed a lot of American credibility, I will hold. They also pulled out of several nuclear treaties, again, destroying reputation. But I'll focus on the dollar bit. So they basically confiscated Venezuelan government assets and handed it over to this opposition, and which then evaporated and left the assets in Western countries at the possession of their governments. It was a theft, pure and simple.
Yep.
Now they're trying to do the same thing to Russia. And the Russians are basically saying, look, if you take this money, first of all, we're going to bankrupt Euroclear and we're going to destroy the European Union financially. We can do that. Secondly, we have more of your assets than you have of ours. So not only will you not gain anything, you will lose, but moreover, we will destroy your financial reputation, so nobody in the world is going to want to do business with you. And that's priceless. And if they pull the final trigger and confiscate these frozen state assets, that will prove to the rest of the world that the West is not a safe place to park money. This is a huge problem, because this whole inflationary death spiral that modern financialized economy relies on is predicated on foreigners buying up American and Western European debt. If they don't do that, the dollar is worthless, which is why Trump was like, we need to keep dollar as a reserve currency. But it's that connection between we need to restabilize the dollar's reputation because it's been damaged by our sanctions, and this is the bridge he needs to cross. And so those sanctions have to go. They're illegal. That entire behavior is thuggish and unbecoming of a serious country. And yet you have, in this particular administration, you have people who are saying, oh, these are instruments of economic statecraft. Brother, you don't understand what that is. Stop talking stupid things, Mr. State Department guy, or, you know, Treasury, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, the sooner these people are kicked out of office, the better. January 21st can't come soon enough. But again, it's the road between that understanding that we must preserve the dollar as a reserve currency and what is destroying it. That's the hardest bridge to cover, because it seems like people don't really realize that this is a self-inflicted wound and that can only be fixed from the inside.
Yeah, I don't think they get it. I think they want to do this from a position of strength. And, you know, it's like America cares so much about its reputation that even in a situation where it seems to be losing, they can't pull back. And so from their point of view, Donald Trump's idea is we're going to sanction anybody who doesn't want to use the dollar. Okay, how the hell does that work? How do you really go to a country and say, if you don't use a dollar, we're going to hit you with tariffs and sanctions, et cetera? Basically, we're going to isolate ourselves that much more and hasten the decay of the dollar. That's all it's effectively going to do.
Well, it's doubling down on stupid.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm all for tariffs if they're intended to protect American industry until it gets rebuilt. Fine.
Right.
That's how it used to work back in the 19th century to great success. But if you're putting tariffs on products that you don't have any intention of making at home, you're depriving your customers of those products, and you're objectively not making their lives better.
Not to mention increasing prices.
I happen to have personal experience in European countries that have high tariffs on certain things that they don't make and have no intention of making. They're just using them as a tax farm.
By the way, and I'm glad you mentioned that, And yeah, we got about 4 minutes. I am fascinated by what is taking place in Germany. Look, man, I got to be honest. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have thought, well, Europe is clearly more bright, meaning more intelligent. Their leaders, I would say, they tend to be better in regards to a country and the way that they organize and manage their affairs. They take care of their citizens. You would have heard me say all of this. Fast forward to after the Ukraine conflict, these people are idiots. These people are full-blown idiots. So Scholz being the top of that list, Angela Merkel, whatever anybody thinks of her, was a dominant political force. And I would argue the face of Europe for 16 years, give or take. And Nord Stream was one of the things that is on her legacy because Germany needed that oil. And what we're finding out, especially after the Ukraine war, is that this garden, as it's called, was effectively a garden because it was running on Russian fuel. And the moment that Russian energy went away and they had to pay 5 times more, fell apart. All of those places end up falling apart, especially Germany, which is supposed to be the beating heart of Europe. The German government has collapsed. And the reason that the German government has collapsed is overfunding Ukraine. Scholz wanted to keep giving money to Ukraine, and one of the other people within the Tracholite Party effectively said, well, wait a minute, what is this going to do? They're clearly losing. They're losing ground every day that we're talking about. Nothing up to this point has worked, meaning we have dumped all of this money into a process that hasn't changed anything. So what is giving more money going to do? This is on top of them blaming Ukraine for blowing up Nord Stream, something that they needed for energy, that they might have even went back to at the end of the conflict, because again, they needed the energy. You get Annalena Baerbock, who I am deeply attracted to, saying that the woman is loony as a fruitcake. But she says this, which I am blown away by that a person would ever say it. This is her talking about Germany giving up things that they need in regards to infrastructure. And I'll read it because it says economic situation last year. The German chancellor already discussed jointly with the federal government that this can't go on. Putin has also invested in it to use the peace in Europe against the cohesion in our societies. Okay, this is Putin's thought, apparently. It says part of the strategy. Now, she goes into how the German government has cut resources in order to fund Ukraine. We want to support Ukraine to secure peace, 37 billion euros. They never planned because we always wanted blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is going faster than I can read it. But basically, the spending in Germany went away from things like education, daycare, school, investments into infrastructure, and those type of things, and used that money to give to Ukraine. So instead of putting money in the German railways, we got to pay for Ukraine. Instead of putting money in the childcare, we got to put money into Ukraine. How the hell does a person say this to their public? Like, meaning, how do you really go to your public with a straight face and says, look, I know you can't take a warm shower. I know our railways suck. I know our industries have been collapsing. I know we're no longer, this power dynamic. And I know we've entered a recession, but we did it for Ukraine. And they're shocked that the government collapsed.
They might as well have set that money on fire. In fact, had they set that money on fire in terms of paper bills, they would have at least had something to heat the German homes with.
Yeah.
But no, she's open. I mean, Baerbock has openly said, I don't care what my voters think. I made promises to Ukraine and I'm going to deliver. In any normal country, that woman would be out on the street, trying to find honest work. But Germany has, all of Europe has this weird system, all of the European Union anyway, in which politicians are not really responsible to their voters. They vote in these elections and you have these post-electoral coalitions and you end up, in France, you vote for Le Pen and you get Macron. You vote against Le Pen, you get Macron. In Britain, you vote against the Tories and you get Labour, who are,
basically
executing the same policies on steroids.
Yeah.
In Germany, you vote against Scholz, and you get the CDU guy, the Merkel's former party, who's a shadow of hers, who's going to do the same thing, only dumber. And you don't really have a choice anymore because there are no parties, because it's complete establishment capture. And even if you get a national government that's good, like in Slovakia or Hungary, Brussels overrides it and says, "Oh, fine, we're not going to give you the money that's due until you do as we say."
Yeah.
And you've got Viktor Orban saying, oh, they want to install a Jawohl government, which is yes sir in German. And so you realize that this is not a democracy of any kind. It's some kind of oligarchical dictatorship in which nobody has any responsibilities, and the worst people in the world have all the power. So
Yeah.
Europe is an absolute mess. I'm sad to say it's going to collapse fairly soon, unfortunately, on a historical scale, so 5, 10, 15 years, maybe sooner. But they're saying now in Germany that they can't call early elections because they need time to print up the ballots because the paper mills have gone bankrupt. But
I
this is how
saw
bad
that.
it is.
Think about how humiliating that is. We can't have an election because we can't afford paper, because we've been giving it all to Ukraine. And just mind blowing to me. Neb, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate this. Always enjoy talking to you in these conversations. Nebojsa Malic, he's a Serbian American journalist, blogger, and translator who wrote a regular column for antiwar.com from 2000 to 2015. And Neb, please tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, I can be found on Twitter at Nebojsa Malic and on Telegram as at the Nebulator. And I'm for those who speak Serbian, I'm also on YouTube and on TikTok as Glas is Amerike.
Oh, man. Thank you for this, Neb. Appreciate it, man. You have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Right. That went well. The sound worked well. I'm going to have to apologize to Mark Slobod. I know he's sick of me. This is killing Jamal. He couldn't get a word in. No, he's great. Nebojsa is awesome. And we went back and forth the entire time. In fact, I thought I talked too much. So there's that. Look, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to be back in all of a minute. Just want to reset. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. If you dig the content, give it a like, share it, subscribe. Also hit the notification bell. Hit that like button while you are here. Subscribe while you are here. Send it to your mama, your daddy. Put it on Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you can think. We are trying to get to 40,000 by the end of the year. We are moving. The show has gained over 1,000 views over the last couple of weeks. Thank you for that. We want to keep this boat rolling. Also, if you really dig the content, consider giving to PayPal, Patreon, or Super Chat, or Super Stickers. All stickers will be read, provided they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. And I will be back in a moment. There we are. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Wherever you are, at work, at home, laying in bed, about to have sex with your special someone, turn on this show, or You wouldn't even know it's on, right? If the radio's on. But definitely continue to listen to the show. If you dig the content, give it a like, share the content, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell. If you dig it, you can support through PayPal, Patreon, or Super Chat or Super Sticker, whichever you want when you want to call it. Those will be read before the end of the show. Glenn Deason may be coming on a bit earlier than I anticipated. There might have been a time screw up on my part. He may be on at 9:30 this morning. I'll see if he responds to the email. We've been trying to get the schedule straight. But let's get to the show. So another interesting factor, as I pointed out first thing this morning, that the Democratic Party is not accommodating blame all that well in this situation. And in one sense, they're being spiteful. People like Joyanne Reid, or who seems to be a drinker, Roland Martin, effectively saying, hey, you didn't vote for our candidate, so you get what you get. Now, this is pretty astonishing when you think about it. The Biden administration has been making excuses for the Netanyahu government, whether it was killing, raping Palestinians, using Palestinians as human shields, going into Lebanon, or for that matter, Gaza, or for that matter, the West Bank, killing and slaughtering. And we're talking about 40 to 100,000 human beings, 2/3 of which are women and children, that the Biden administration funded, backed, politically supported, paid other governments not to do anything about, even pressured governments like Egypt, or for the matter, Jordan, in order to expel those Palestinians into those countries. So after all of this killing, bloodshed, and slaughter going over the course of a year, the Biden administration now looks you in the face and say, hey, could you please vote for us? Could you please vote for us? And then you get people like Roland Martin who say, yeah, I understand he was killing all of you, but you should have voted for my candidate. And so now you get what you get. Here's a question. Is there really that much of a difference between an Antony Blinken and a Marco Rubio? Is there really? Like, are we really saying that there's daylight between these two weird neoconish personalities? Are we really saying that there's a difference? Meaning, I would argue that Rubio and Blinken are a 1-to-1. Both are incompetent, both are neocons. I don't see the major difference between these things. Meaning, Joe Biden's position on the Israeli thing was already to the far right. I'm not sure how much further to the right you can go than Joe Biden's position on Israel. Anything that Netanyahu has done up to this point has been supported by Joe Biden. And this includes not just paying for it, but lying for it. When you see Blinken or Kirby or Matthew Miller and all of them, these slimy characters, these psychopaths, getting out there justifying the killing of babies, the killing of children, the killing of women, and they do it day after day after day. War is hell. Well, I mean, all of this belongs to Hamas. This is Hamas's fault. They didn't have a choice but to kill 70,000 women and children. No choice but to do that. And you're saying it's their fault for not voting for you. It's your fault. It's your fault. You also have people who have come to the conclusion that, hey, we shouldn't be finger pointing. We shouldn't blame each other for this loss. We should put the blame where it belongs, on Republicans. We should blame Republicans. So this is the view who has been going through all sorts of changes over this election and have not also been taking this well. Here's woman from
what I don't like.
Let's hear her 2 cents. Let's see if she nails it.
Is this finger pointing blame game that's going on within the Democratic Party. And I've said this before. Why isn't the conversation about how Republicans can get behind a convicted felon? Why Republicans are behind this crass, I don't even have the words for it, this twice impeached former president. What I don't like is this.
So it's Republicans' fault. So it's Republicans' fault. Is that what you're telling me? What is with these people attacking voters? Why, for the life of me, don't they look at their candidate and say, hey, our candidate was problematic. She was the problem. or Biden was the problem, or the Democratic Party is the problem. Why don't they do that? What is it with these people where they can't necessarily understand that the job of a political candidate is to get votes? Meaning the first and primary job of any candidate who you are putting up to run for office is to be able to win the legitimacy that you can, the credibility of the person to be able to go get votes, make an argument that gets people to say, yes, I want to support that person. The reality of it is, the trick with Obama was he was stunningly charismatic. Meaning, I'm realizing now that it's not that Obama did anything special. Obama was just a special, unique, charismatic figure who had the ability to speak. He had the ability to project himself in a way that came across with a certain amount of gravitas. And he could, on his own, carry the Democratic Party to 2 victories. The moment that that unique figure left, the Democratic Party was left with the Democratic Party, in which case the American public relented. I'm saying that there needs to be an interrogation of your party. Stop looking at voters and pointing the finger and say, you should have voted for us, as opposed to, why weren't you a better candidate? I don't know if it's because these people are in a certain economic class that they just, my life is going fantastic. And because my life is going fantastic, Kamala Harris is great. And so people should have voted for Kamala Harris. When you're looking at the exit polls, what it shows is that the people who are under economic stress, either moderately or severely, ended up voting for Trump. The people who were doing well in life voted for Harris. I'm saying that they are getting this wrong. They are continuously pointing the finger at voters as opposed to holding their own political leaders and their failures accountable. Nobody told Kamala Harris to go running around the country with Liz Cheney. Nobody told Kamala Harris to be strong on the border, something that nobody in their mind would have believed. And yet, you're here at the border being tough at the border. She's the one who was fighting transnational gangs. That's why she could be tough on the border, because she was fighting transnational gangs. And Donald Trump doesn't know anything about fighting transnational gangs. That nonsense. Even if you go into this thing about her making this argument for war, meaning Donald Trump hangs around with dictators. Now, when she's saying that, understand the reason that she's saying that is because Donald Trump was willing to go to meet with Kim Jong-un, or Donald Trump was willing to pull those people out of Afghanistan, or Donald Trump was willing to stop Obama's regime change war, even though he still decided to steal the oil, or for that matter, murder Soleimani. I'm putting out that she attacked him for being willing to negotiate. Or Gaza, not being able to take a different tact and position than the Biden administration, than the genocidal Biden administration on Gaza. Meaning all of these were right-wing positions. These were not left-wing positions. It's not a situation where you can blame the left, nor can you blame your voters for a Democrat who effectively ran a Republican-light campaign. How are you shocked at this result? I mean, Kamala Harris got the less amount of youth vote, going all the way back to John Kerry. You had less number of people who were voting. There was like 8% drop in the number of people who even came out for the election. She effectively, and the Democratic Party broadly, depressed the vote. And their response is, we should blame Jill Stein. We should blame Green Party voters. We should blame Republicans. We should blame Muslims. Blacks and Hispanics are misogynistic. As opposed to the honest, bare bones, brimming light of their truth is that your candidate failed. And more broadly speaking, your party failed. You cannot deliver a vision and a message for the American public that American public will come and vote for your candidate and your party in that election. Stop blaming everyone else. Our guest is here. Excellent. We are joined with the one and only Laith Marouf. Laith Marouf is an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. Laith, what is going on, my man? How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
Doing all right. Thank you very much for the invitation, Jamal.
Oh, man, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you joining me. I remember the first thing I asked you yesterday, well, were you safe? You are in Lebanon currently, Beirut, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, yes, I am in Beirut. There's a few drones flying up here. You can't hear them, but the minute I open the window, you would be able to hear them.
What is going on the ground over there? I look, man, the images that have been coming out have been deeply disheartening. It seems that the Israeli government has decided to, the way correct me, I'm going to try to explain it, but correct me if I get this wrong. It seems that the Netanyahu government has decided to attack Beirut almost as a way of blackmail to try to get the government to sign this kind of agreement to allow Israel to invade and occupy southern Lebanon. Now, this seems to be rather outrageous, with the idea that we're going to keep bombing and killing indiscriminately in Beirut until the government signs over saying we are allowed to occupy and invade southern Lebanon. Is that what I'm getting right, or am I getting this wrong? I mean, because otherwise I don't quite understand the bombing of Beirut in this way. What is going on? Am I getting this correct?
You are getting it 100% correct. It's basically terrorism. You know, you try to terrorize the population in order to reach your political goal. That's the definition of terrorism. Because the Zionists have been failing miserably in the invasion attempt in South Lebanon, it's now 46 days that they have deployed 5 corps, meaning 100 and something thousand soldiers. And 46 days, they're facing off only 6,000 Hezbollah fighters that have held them to a standstill, and they haven't been able to enter 1 inch of South Lebanon. Just for our viewers that don't remember, in 2006, the Zionists invaded Lebanon, and they were able in 33 days to enter 1 valley and go in as deep as 30 somewhat kilometers. In 1982, it took them only 8 days to reach from the border of South Lebanon all the way to occupy Beirut. So we can see how much of a beating that they are getting. They've lost tens of tanks and APCs, hundreds of Israeli soldiers dead, according to the Israelis themselves, in these 45 days. So they only take out their frustration on children, women, unarmed civilians. They've killed already 5 different journalists in Lebanon. They've killed almost 300 medics and doctors. They're targeting only purely civilian sites as a way to take out their frustration at their impetus on the battlefield, and to terrorize the population of Lebanon in hopes that the Lebanese population flips against the resistance in South Lebanon, and that's a delusion. It will never happen, actually.
So the president, or let's say the prime minister, is not going to accept that agreement of effectively, because I got to be honest, when this conflict started, it confused the hell out of me. As an American, I have a certain point of view of the world that is not necessarily right in other countries. So my point of view initially was, okay, well, obviously the Lebanese military is going to get involved to help Hezbollah to push back Israel. Okay, well, that didn't happen. The Lebanese military didn't fire a shot. It was Hezbollah that was effectively fighting at southern Lebanon in order to fight back the invasion of Israel. And then I watched as the Lebanese government actually considered basically saying, look, we will sign the agreement where we will send our military into southern Lebanon. And I was like, well, there's no way. What are you doing? Like, it fully makes sense to me. And it took my producer, Laith, to explain basically the inner workings of Lebanon is far more complicated than that. I mean, what is going on the ground? Let's start from that angle. As you said, there are drones flying overhead. Hezbollah has fought Israel to a standstill in southern Lebanon. And so Israel has decided to bomb Beirut with this idea of trying to get the government to either have a civil war. Is that what Israel is trying to provoke?
Yeah, they're trying to provoke a civil war. But again, this is something that's impossible right now. They wish that they can go back to the 1980s and 70s,
Right.
when they were able to manipulate parts of the Christian population, the Maronite sect, to create these Christian supremacist parties like the Phalange here that conducted the massacres in the Palestinian refugee camps under the protection of the Israelis. Some of our listeners, viewers could remember the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982, and that was conducted by this Phalange party. Go forward in time, a decade and somewhat ago, the Maronite Church accepted the Pope as the representative of God. Basically, the Maronite Church got merged into the Catholic Church. And we've seen over the last year the Pope multiple times condemning the genocide in Gaza, condemning the massacres that are happening. So the ability of the instigating the Maronite Church and its priests here to preach hate was ended with that. So now what we have is that even those remnants of the Phalange party are unable to find preachers to preach this hate on their behalf. So they're not able to mobilize anybody within the Maronite sect.
I see.
The second thing is that in the vile animalistic behavior of the Zionists, it led them to target churches in Lebanon. There's now at least 12 churches destroyed, historical churches, some of the oldest on the planet, and many Christian villages in the south completely destroyed and emptied. So because of this indiscriminate fascism of the Zionists, although they want to instigate some revolt or whatever within the Christian community, their actions are driving the Christian community towards the resistance and solidarity with them. And we see now that almost all the churches in Lebanon opened their grounds for internally displaced, who are mainly Shia from the south. And we see the Christian villages taking in a huge amount of the internally displaced. So it is impossible at this point for the Israelis to instigate a civil war, and that's why they are going on this indiscriminate rampage of targeting civilian infrastructure and civilian homes.
Let me ask you, the Smotrich, the lunatic in Israel, has just come out and effectively said, we're going to annex the West Bank. Now, they were already occupying the West Bank, but now, after Trump's election, they apparently think Trump is going to back us on this, and so this is what we're going to do. To be honest, though, even before Trump got elected, it would be hard for me to see Joe Biden doing anything against it either. Meaning Joe Biden would have probably sat there as they would have gone through this, just like they're going through this other stuff. They seem to be using October 7th as their 9/11 moment. This, in the same way that the U.S. was like, we can reshape the Middle East because of 9/11. It seems that Netanyahu is taking it upon himself to say, we can create greater Israel now that we've had October 7th. Give me a take on that. I mean, is Israel winning? Because ultimately, it seems that all of this is predicated on this idea that Israel is beating Hamas, beating Hezbollah. They're going after Iran. They're taking the West Bank. They're attacking in Syria. They're attacking in Yemen. But is that the same thing as winning? Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm glad that you brought the new Middle East plan by the United States, because it's a great indicator of what could Israel achieve. I mean, the United States spent the good part of 2 decades trying to beat the Arabic and Muslim peoples in the region here into submission, with genocide of 1.5 million Iraqis, 500,000 Afghanis, 500,000 Syrians, 500,000 Libyans. And 2 decades of that genocide did not lead to a new Middle East as the empire wanted. And the Arabic people, the Muslim peoples in the region, still are defiant of American imperialism. So can a puny vassal colony that we call Israel achieve what the United States with all its might over 2 decades couldn't achieve? Of course, the only people that believe that they can do that are those who think they are chosen people. And this is the core of the problem. You have these fanatic Zionists that actually think that there's a God in the sky that is not the God of Abraham, that is not the God of Moses, that said we come from one mother and one father and that we're all equal, and said don't steal, don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's belongings.
Yeah.
No, they believe in a different God that thinks that is vicious, this God that has a chosen people that we are all unequal to the rest of us, and that approves to them to kill, steal, and covet your neighbor's belongings. This is the core problem, and this is why the elite, the Zionist elite inside the colony and inside the West are separated from reality so dramatically that they can and they think that they can achieve what the United States didn't achieve in 2 decades.
Yeah. The reporting in the U.S. has been somewhat conflicting. In some respects, Joe Biden would grumble behind the scenes. In other respects, you'd have a situation where Joe Biden would approve of Israel going into Lebanon. And look, I think at the end of the day, there's been this question about whether it's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. Is this U.S. policy being affected by Israel, or is this Israel effectively hijacking the United States in order to affect its policy? Which one do you think it is? I mean, do you think it's basically, regardless of what the U.S. says and what the grumbling is behind the scenes, ultimately the U.S. is giving money, support, political support, diplomatic support, etc., to this project? Is this the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail?
I think it's both at once. Okay. And the way we can judge it is looking at what is the strategic goal of the United States? The strategic goal of the United States is to remain as the hegemon, the only empire on the planet. And once you understand that, you then looking at the map, you realize that the most important geopolitical position on this whole planet is Palestine. Not because we are special as Palestinians or we're better or whatever it is. It's just because it is the transportation and communication knot of the planet. That's all the communication, cultural or not, all the transport has to pass through that knot. And therefore, to remain the hegemon, you have no choice but to keep hold of it. So this is where the Zionists, what the Zionists understand. And this is why they can do whatever they want to, because they know that the United States has no choice if it wants to remain the hegemon, but to keep supporting and holding this colony in its position. So once we understand that, that means that it makes it easier for us to analyze, and then we look at what is the strategic goal of the Zionists. The strategic goal of the Zionists is to have permanency for this colony. And after 100 years of genocide and war against the Palestinians and the Arabs in the region, still the Arabic people refuse to accept the existence of this colony. And the Palestinians have yet to surrender. So once you look at it this way and you see that the Palestinians, prior to October 7th last year, already have returned to being the majority within the historical land of Palestine. For the first time since 1948, the Palestinians inside the borders of Palestine have returned to being the majority. Therefore, the only thing left in front of the Zionists to do was either to accept equality and end apartheid and have one state for all its citizens, like happened in South Africa, and or initiate a new genocide that can change the demographic again and at least save them for another 100 years before the balance of demography returns to the side of the Palestinians.
But I don't see how that works. I mean, the reason why I say that is if you think about it, Israel does have the capacity to kill and murder a lot of people. They can slaughter women and children in prolific fashion, granted. But that's different than winning a war. I mean, the United States was able to kill what 1 million, 2 million Vietnamese, but we still lost that war. And even if you're talking about like Iraq or Afghanistan, look, we can kill and spend $10 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan, but at the end of the day, the Taliban is now back in Afghanistan, and Iraq has been trying to kick us out for God knows how long. And so I look at this and I think to myself, okay, well, Israel has been able to murder a lot of Palestinians. They've been able to murder a lot of Lebanese. They've been able to bomb all of these places, but it's been a year and they're still fighting a resistance group in Gaza. They're still fighting Hezbollah and have not been able to make progress in southern Lebanon. Despite being able to kill the heads of Hezbollah, they are still firing rockets into Israel and still, collecting, creating damage in that situation. And this air of invincibility that Israel once had has been shattered by the ability of Iran to show not just deterrence, but domination in the region. And so you have all of these people who have effectively left Israel. The economy is going into the toilet. How can a colony maintain itself under this scenario? I don't know how they believe that they're going to somehow escape from this with some kind of victory. I don't even know what victory looks like in this context. Give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, you are correct. And this is because you're a rational person and you're analyzing things rationally, right? And this is where the Zionists have separated themselves from reality. Look, I believe that within a year from today, Palestine will be liberated. There will be no more Zionists inside historic Palestine. And that could happen in two ways. Either the defeat of the Zionist colony and the acceptance of equality at the end of this year from today, and or we will all be dead. There will be a nuclear holocaust on this planet. Either way, there will be no more Zionist colony in the end of this. And this is what our viewers in the United States and in the rest of the Western world need to understand, that we are going towards this eventuality of either all of us are going to be living in a world war and a nuclear holocaust, or the Zionist colony has to end in a peaceful way.
Now explain that. Go into that for me. Go into the steps for that. Because what I think you're saying is that all things being equal, the fight that ends up happening can drag all of these other powers into the conflict. Because look, Israel is a nuclear power, right? Iran may well, as they've pointed out, if they feel like they're in danger, can also get a nuclear weapon. They even make the point of saying, technically, we can do this. This is not really a technical issue at this point. This is more of an issue for the Ayatollah, basically saying, don't do it. Go into it. Why do you believe that it could end up in a nuclear holocaust?
So let's look at the military reality right now. As you pointed out, they are militarily defeated on the ground inside Gaza. 40,000 Hamas fighters have been holding them to a standstill for 14 months. They are militarily defeated on the ground in Lebanon. They are militarily defeated in the air by Iran. And Yemen has, a virtual blockade on them that is requiring a full participation of the U.S., the U.K., and all of NATO bombardment almost on a weekly basis of Yemen to try to subdue Yemen. So what is the future right now? The only path forward for the Zionists is to drag the U.S. into directly fighting the war on their behalf. They're already fighting the war on their behalf, but in hidden. A lot of these air raids, not only on Yemen, that are being conducted by the U.S. and NATO, even the air raids here in Lebanon and in Gaza are partially being conducted by the West. You can't tell me that the Israelis can conduct 2,000 air raids in a span of a few hours on Lebanon with their few hundred aircraft. That cannot happen. Okay, so what we will see right now from now till January and the inauguration of Trump is that Netanyahu will be allowed to go buck wild on the region, and in the hopes that he can destroy as much of the resistance as possible before the coming of Trump, so they can have better standing in a negotiation table when Trump arrives. But that's also a crazy talk, obviously. If the Israelis increase their bombardment of the region, they will face the same. They're already losing, as I said, against the axis of resistance. And so clearly, when Trump comes into power, he will not have a better situation militarily on the ground, and the Zionists will be wailing at that point, and they will have to, the US has to enter the fight on their behalf. Let's say they attack Iran even without a nuclear weapon, but they attack its nuclear sites. That is actually nuclear warfare. There will be nuclear fallout on parts of Iran because of the attacks on these nuclear reactors. And it's good to remember that President Lukashenko of Belarus said that he will be providing a nuclear umbrella for Iran. So Iran doesn't even need to manufacture a nuclear weapon to respond at that point. Belarus will do that for them. Similarly, Iran can attack Israel's nuclear reactors without using nuclear weapons, and we will see the same nuclear fallout on the Zionist colony. So, but once the either nuclear sites are attacked or a nuclear weapon is used, then it will be free for all across the planet. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Belarus has nuclear weapons. Russia may use nuclear weapons on Ukraine at that point. So once the threat is acted on of using nuclear weapons or attacking nuclear sites, then it will be world war, and every nuclear power will be using its weapons. This is not, therefore, I personally think that it's not going to happen. There will be no use of nuclear weapons by Israel, and there will be no attacks on Iranian nuclear sites. And I like to quote the great poet, prophet, Bob Marley, "Have no fear for the atomic energy, for none of them can stop the time."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what is that? A prophet, Bob Marley. Yeah, it's terrifying. And, with Donald Trump coming into office, he's, like I said, I have no idea what Trump is going to do. I mean, the reality of it is, I don't know how he could do much more than Joe Biden, though, frankly. I mean, Biden's basically sat there and let Netanyahu does anything he wants. When you said Netanyahu go buck wild, and my thought was, okay, what has he been doing up to this point, if not going buck wild? From your point of view, Iran is saying that they're going to launch True Promise 3, that effectively they are going to respond, and they're going to respond because they want to create a deterrence. They believe that Israel has lost its mind at this point, and Israel is not going to stop. Hence, they feel they need to make a show of that level of deterrence. Do you think they're really going to go through with this? And if they do go through with this, what happens after they go through with this? Like, this seems to be utter chaos at this point.
They will go through with it for sure, and it's going to be a bigger attack than True Promise 2.
Yeah.
Yesterday there was a joint summit of the Arabic League and the Organization of Islamic States in Riyadh, capital of Saudi Kingdom, and the vice president of Iran was there, the president of Syria was there, and practically all the presidents of the Arab and Muslim countries. And in this, I know that a lot of these countries just talk a lot, like Turkey and some of these Gulf countries. But if we look at the final statement from the summit, it was asking for a Chapter 7 resolution by the United Nations Security Council to force the end of the genocide in Gaza. So what does that Chapter 7 means? It means that they're asking for a no-fly zone over historic Palestine, and they're asking for an invasion force to defeat the Zionists and force them to end the genocide.
But why don't they do it? But why don't they do it? Like when this, I mean, I got to be honest, man. The Arab states, the fact that they've allowed this level of killing, of women and children to the tune of 40 to 100,000. And they just stood by and watched. And places like Saudi Arabia, Jordan is humiliating. Jordan was allowing attacks through its own territory. In fact, when they attacked Iran, apparently they flew through Jordan in order to make those attacks. And so it's like these people sit up there and talk while this happens month after month after month. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was deeply annoyed by the talk, either from Erdogan, the king of Jordan, or for that matter, even Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Oh, no, you're right, 100%. And this is why I, put the caveat there that these guys talk a lot. But one thing is that you could imagine that the last time something equivalent to this happened at the Security Council, where a resolution under Chapter 7 was requested, was the United States requesting to invade Iraq. And if we remember, the Russians and the Chinese voted at the time, vetoed, and the United States went ahead anyways and invaded Iraq.
Right.
So we're going at least to have a very similar situation. If the Arab and Muslim bloc and the African bloc and the Latin bloc and the old Warsaw bloc, basically Russia and China, put forward a resolution under Chapter 7 and the US vetoes it, this still gives the whole world the right to invade the Zionist colony. I don't expect, of course, Jordan and or those Gulf countries, which were all created by the British in World War I and World War II and after. Most of these Gulf states are, created in the 1960s or 70s. They're vassals, all of them. But it will give more legitimacy to anyone who is going to be conducting war against the Zionist colony. That's for sure.
But do you see any of these states getting to the point where the amount of blood that's being guzzled is enough for them to get involved? I mean, or are these states just puppets? Meaning, I don't have any belief that Jordan, Saudi Arabia cares about the Palestinian plight. I just don't think they do. They're, from their point of view, they were perfectly willing to make deals with Israel in order to ignore the Palestinian issue altogether and coming together within these kind of Abraham Accords. Do you think, is the issue, MBS at one point brought up this notion of him being deposed, saying that he could be assassinated or something like that. And he was bringing this up in the context of a population that is very angry about the Palestinian issue, whereas the leadership doesn't care about the Palestinian issue. Does the fact that there's this kind of upswell, this anger, whether it's being in Turkey, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in Jordan for that matter, a large part of the Jordanian population are Palestinian, is there enough public anger and indignation to get any of these countries to get more involved? For God's sake, in Egypt, you have the corridor being taken by Israel, the Philadelphia corridor. Egypt hasn't done anything about it. They've complained, but they haven't done anything about it. Would there be a situation where these states would actually take military action over this issue, or is this pretty much off the table?
These states have been vessels for so long that it's impossible to see them change suddenly direction. Look at the King of Jordan. He's half British. His mother is not even Arabic. He had to have a whole year of training to speak Arabic correctly when he became the king.
Wow.
So there is no way that the Jordan as a state changes. But on the ground inside Jordan, the population is restless. There is demonstrations every couple of days across Jordan. There's thousands of Jordanians right now languishing in jail as political prisoners. All the youth that were leading these demonstrations over the last year have been rounded, the student leaders and others. And still, even with all this repression, We saw a couple of, a month ago or something, a Jordanian truck driver at the Alembi crossing bridge over the Jordan River take out 4 Israeli border, agents from point blank, right? So the population of Jordan is boiling, and at any moment could be in full revolt. Okay, and so this possibility of full revolt, let's say in Jordan, would be most likely in the situation of a full regional war, where the Iraqi resistance on the border of Jordan somehow invades, which is a big possibility. American bases in Jordan must be taken out in a situation of a full-out war in the region for the border of Palestine to be open for fighters to enter from Jordan. So I think Jordan is the weakest link amongst all the vassals of the US in the region. In Egypt, the population is so oppressed and so impoverished on purpose over the last 5-6 years. The US and the elite in Egypt did what the US wants, and we saw how the waters of the Nile were being cut off from Egypt. We saw how the all the aid to Egypt was being cut by the Gulf countries and so on. And that's all to force the Egyptian population to be stuck thinking about their day-to-day bread and butter. What are they going to eat instead of what is their state doing? But again, I think in a situation of a full-out regional war, the Egyptian military right now, there is a lot of discontent inside it, because the Egyptian military sees itself as the origin of Arab nationalism. Egypt has the glory of Jamal Abdel Nasser in the 1940s and 50s. So and the last time there was an anti-colonialist change in Egypt, it happened through the Free Officers' Revolt led by Jamal Abdel Nasser. So the possibilities of change inside Egypt are only going to come from inside the military.
Laith, is there something, is there a question that you want to be asked that I'm not asking, if that makes sense? Like, is there something that I don't know what I don't know, if that makes sense, about what something that is either going on in the ground or something of a larger context about what is basically taking place? I mean, I guess from my point of view, we're seeing a new world come into fruition, and all of this stuff is chaos in the birth of that new world. And I think part of that new world is this notion of eliminating hegemons. And I agree with you that from the standpoint of the US, the last major colony is Israel. Like, if you think about it, many of the other colonies around the globe have fundamentally fell apart or have become states. So the US was a colony, it's become a state. Australia has become a state on its own terms. But this notion of Britain creating little colonies around the world, for the most part, has ended with the exception of Israel. And as I point out to people, Israel is very similar to the United States. I mean, the United States got to an area, expanded, killed all of the Native Americans in the population or put them in reservations. If that's not what Israel is doing, what is it? The only difference is these are not Native Americans. These are the indigenous population of Arabs that they're basically colonizing, put them into camps, either exterminating or expelling them. It's very similar in regards. I think the main difference is there's no video camera for people to see it, whereas there's a camera where you could see them killing or imprisoning all of these people. I guess my major question that I've used to ask people that I never really got an answer to is, how does it end? At the end of this, what does it look like? Is it, because I can't see us going back to status quo. Like, I can't see us going back to something that looks like October 6th. I mean, I don't know how you kill 30,000 children and then it's like, okay, well, let's go back to normal. I don't see that happening. From your point of view, what does this look like?
Yes, we are now living the same moment between World War I and World War II, when Germany, Italy, and Japan refused to end their colonialism. If you remember, because the British and the French didn't end their colonialism and just relabeled it as mandate in the Arabic world. And the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese went crazy, and we saw the slaughter in Libya and Ethiopia and Korea and Angola and so forth, right, at the hands of those powers. And that moment led to the collapse of the League of Nations and all the international law body that was agreed upon. So now we see the West as a whole, with the empire ruled from DC, rejecting international law and rejecting all the UN agencies. The biggest example is the attacks on UNRWA that we're seeing. So once the West has refused international law and the international agencies are unable to implement international law, that means that we're living the collapse of. And at this moment, there is no such thing as international law or international human rights law. And so this is going to be a violent period. And this is why the biggest possibility is that we will have World War III if the West doesn't agree to equity with the rest of humanity, equality with the rest of humanity. And so it is a dangerous moment. The UN and all its agencies are collapsing. International law doesn't exist. And it will be written, the new international law will be written by the blood of the victors that fight for it. And, the rise of BRICS and other bodies like BRICS is the, beginnings of filling the gap that the UN is leaving behind it.
I totally agree with you. And that's the way I was looking at it too. I mean, it's chaos. And I strongly suspect that what's going to end up at the end of it is no more hegemons. I have a hard time believing that the world is going to accept this premise of having a currency that can be used as a weapon. These countries that have the ability to just kind of flout economic law in regards to the killing and everything else. I get the sense that there'll be something new, even though I don't necessarily what that something new is. Laith, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate this. And let me ask you this one last thing. Is there anything that I should ask you that I'm not thinking about asking you that is of importance that I'm just fundamentally missing?
Yes, there's a few things that we can quickly go through. Since the morning, the Zionists have been bombarding actually Beirut. There's been at least 8 different raids on Beirut. At the same time, the resistance has been bombarding the industrial zones around Haifa, Akka, and Tel Aviv. Yesterday had the biggest wave of missiles fired since the beginning of the war by Hezbollah. At the same time, the Yemenis fired a hypersonic missile. This is their 4th or 5th time they do that. And hit the target, main Israeli airbase around Tel Aviv. On a daily basis, the Iraqi resistance is conducting upwards of 12 operations, drones and guided missiles hitting the Zionist colony. And they are concentrating their firepower, the Iraqis, on the Golan Heights. And this is very important because it seems like the Golan Heights will be the major battlefield if in a situation of a breakout of a regional war. The Israelis attacked just outside Damascus yesterday in the Sid Zainab area. They're claiming that they assassinated Hezbollah's commander for the Golan troops. And that shows you how worried they are about the increase of numbers of Iraqi, Yemeni, and Lebanese fighters on the borders of the Golan Heights. This is, kind of an overall of what is happening. And I think we should all keep our eyes on the Golan Heights in the next few weeks. It could be the major battlefield.
One more question. Do we know the number of casualties for Israel? I mean, because clearly they're taking casualties. One of the things that Gallant, before he was fired, he pointed out effectively like, yes, he wants these kind of ultra-religious or ultra-Orthodox into the military, saying that, part of it was an issue of fairness, but also they needed the manpower because they were losing people. Do we know how many people they have been losing in these conflicts? I would imagine they're taking a much heavier death toll in Lebanon than they were in Gaza.
Yes. I mean, If we just count the number of tanks and APCs that Hezbollah destroyed on camera, since the beginning of the attempted invasion, we're talking about 40 somewhat tanks. So
Wow.
each of those tanks has a crew of at least 4 soldiers inside. And there's no way that once the tank is on fire that those soldiers survive. But let's be very generous, okay, and say half of them died and half of them survived. So that's alone in those tanks, 80 soldiers dead. And Hezbollah released multiple videos of targeting Israeli soldier gatherings that are outside the armored vehicles or bunkers and so on. And in those videos, you can again count at least 40, 50 Israeli soldiers dead. So the numbers that the Israelis are claiming to have died are a fraction of what the reality is. And I want to say, I personally think that they've lost, at least 1,000 soldiers on the front here in South Lebanon. Remember that Hezbollah is only releasing a fraction of the operations in video formats, especially that they withdrew all the GoPros from their soldiers on the front after the pager terrorist attack. So we're only seeing videos filmed on DSLRs and such from far away and or from the camera on the missiles or the drone. We're not seeing the actual fighting face-to-face inside the border villages in Lebanon. But according to the Israelis themselves, every time they enter a village with a platoon, 1 or 2 Hezbollah fighters takes out the whole platoon.
Yeah.
And so it's clearly that they have, multiple folds the number of injured and dead that they are claiming.
Yeah. You expect them to be somewhat dishonest about the number of people they're going to lose. Laith, man, thank you for this. Laith Marouf. He is an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. Laith, what can people follow you, by the way? What can people find you?
You can find us at freepalestine.video, and from there you can get all our social media networks accounts. We're on Twitter at TV Free Palestine. And yes, please watch our content. We have journalists all across the West Bank and Lebanon and Jordan giving you daily reports and much more.
Laith, I will be following you. Man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. All right, let's take a break. Guys, if you dig this content, like the show, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell. Like, share, and share the content. Do that also. Share it to any and everybody that you think may like it. Also, if you enjoy and dig the content, please consider giving through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. All chats will be read by the end of the show. Don't be racist, sexist, or bigoted. Even if you're taking the piss out of me, it will be read. Hit the like button. I'll be back in about a minute. Just to reset. Back shortly. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas, and I run from Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. I hope you guys are digging the show up to this point. If you dig the show, give it a like, share, subscribe. You can always support the work through PayPal, Patreon, or Super Chat. I want to bring in my guests. I'm joined with Emanuel Pastreich. I may be mispronouncing it, but I want to get you to correct me in a moment. He's an independent candidate for president in the United States. He has a PhD from Harvard University, author of 12 books, many on the Southeast Asian history and politics. Emanuel is currently director of the Earth Management Institute and director of the Asia Institute for Seoul. Emanuel, how do I pronounce your last name, by the way?
I go by Pastreich. But
Pastreich.
Emanuel's good.
Emmanuel is good. Excellent. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate you joining me. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate having this chance to talk honestly about where we are.
Absolutely. One of your books was named Why We Need an Independent Candidate. I was looking up some of the books that you wrote, 12 books from Harvard. That's a hell of a pedigree. And not many people may know, but you were running for president of the United States also. Why do we need an independent candidate in U.S. politics? How would that make a difference in our politics? And isn't Trump independent enough in regards to getting an independent candidate? I mean, American public and the working class voted for him after all.
Right. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, among the candidates you're given a choice between, people chose Trump, but it wasn't particularly a democratic process. In terms of being independent, I would say first, if you're taking any money from wealthy individuals, you're not independent. So the only way to be independent is to have nothing, be like me, right? Unemployed, with no assets, and for the most part, not allowed to live in the United States. Then you're talking independent.
Well, explain that. You say you're not allowed to live in the United States. Explain that part. The audience may not
I'm
know.
in the U.S. right now, staying with my mother, but I don't have any income. I don't make any income. I haven't really been able to live in the U.S. since 2007, although I come through. Why can't I find any employment in the United States? Well, I don't know. Ask Homeland Security. But I think that's the stakes, that we have a large number of sort of limited hangout people who are somewhat critical. I mean, there's sort of different levels to it, but they're not really willing to take on the serious issues. If you take on serious, real politics in America, you're not going to be. I mean, my run for the Green Party, I was candidate. I mean, Cornel West and I were the only two candidates in the Green Party at the time who were registered with the Federal Election Commission and had websites and active, and I didn't exist. In fact, my campaign in the Green Party was only reported in an article in Korea, right? Not a single American journal mentioned that I even existed, including conspiracy websites and progressive leftist socialist groups. And that was because we took on real issues. And as candidate, I don't recognize Donald Trump as president. I don't think it's a legitimate election. I have called for a special election, which would be legitimate, in which we'd actually have candidates who are not the puppets of global finance. And I previously, when Donald Trump, or when Biden was supposedly elected, I did the same thing, and then I called for a provisional government. I said the United States, that citizens should organize their own constitutional government, and that we shouldn't recognize this privatized entity representing essentially Wall Street, financial institutions, Israeli intelligence firms, et cetera, that we shouldn't have to recognize this as our government because it violates Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and basic moral ethics, basic ethics. So, I think we're going to be facing this even worse now.
Well, I guess it leads to two questions. I guess the first question is, well, what are the real issues? I mean, that kind of naturally comes from the answer. And I guess the second question I would get is, why do you think, give me your analysis of why the election turned out the way the election turned out. Well, let's go to the first one first. What are the real issues? You were saying that none of the candidates hit the real issues. And by the way, I agree with you on this. I mean, we had a campaign where we were in two wars, not just two wars, we're $35 trillion in debt. And these guys were effectively talking about abortion and immigration as some of the main two issues that they wanted to basically talk about. What are the real issues that we should be hitting and dealing with?
Right. So I really appreciate, Jamal, what you just said there, and your support on this perspective. We have to talk about real politics. So real politics. I mean, abortion is a real issue and immigration is a real issue. So I'm not saying they don't count, but the real politics is about, first, the effort to control your mind, right? this is a combination between global IT firms, Oracle, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and a couple others. And they are controlling information. They're brainwashing you through repetitive programming, through pornography, through social media, through entertainment, to make you stupid, basically, to dumb down the population, and then to herd you into a controlled environment where you're incapable of effective resistance. The second is the control of food, right? To take over farming, to divorce. I mean, in the United States and other countries, we used to grow our own food. We were independent, right? And local economies existed in which people didn't use money that much. And now we're forced into something where basically all food is controlled by corporations. And now with GMOs, seeds are controlled, et cetera. So that is linked to the control of the economy. And that comes through the forced dependence on international trade, where everything you buy is made somewhere else. So you can't have an independent economic system in your neighborhood. And it means that everything you buy, 10%, 20%, 50% of it goes to multinational corporations and banks because they handle trade, manufacturing. They move your factory to Thailand, and then but they're still selling it at more or less the price it would be. I mean, if it was made locally, but that extra money that you're paying is going to them. And so the money doesn't stay in your neighborhood, right? It goes out. Every time you go to Walmart and you pay for something, it's not going to help your neighbors, right? It's going to help multinational banks. So that's real politics. And then the military, industrial, financial, Federal Reserve system, in which you have essentially money is controlled, is made up by private banks, and it's used to buy up what you own. So land, for example, things like Bank of America or BlackRock or Blackstone, particularly, they print up fake money. It devalues your money in the bank. It becomes worth less. Inflation is much higher than, of course, it's reported. And then they use this fake money to buy up land. So it's now owned. You have to rent it. It used to be people owned houses, and now they have to rent them, and they have to rent them from agents who basically represent multinational banks. So these things I just described, this is real politics in America. This is, where the front line in our fight is. The other stuff, it can be real, and there are real victims of things like abortion bans. I don't dismiss that. It's really serious. But it is also simultaneously being used as a way, a sort of, get your hand out of my pocket type activity to distract us. And Trump is the classic example of that. He, everyone's like, I hate Trump, 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 Trump. And this is a distraction to keep us from focusing on the way in which a totalitarian global IT bank structure, which is tied to Israel to a large degree. Israel is not the only part of it, but basically Israel is sort of like the battering ram, the ugly, the bad cop in this equation. And that's another problem I had a lot with the left, the so-called left, like the Green Party where I ran, in which they say something like, it's terrible how mean the Israelis are being to the Palestinians. 100% true. But they didn't want to go to the next step, which is to say, how are the same privatized firms, security firms, running Gaza and the West Bank, how are they successfully bidding and getting contracts for the U.S.-Mexican border? How are they training your local police force?
Right.
How are they, supplying security cameras and equipment to your local shopping center? How is this sort of United States and Israel increasingly both being governed by this sort of invisible government, secret governance? And that I really felt needed to be sort of at the center of our discussion of politics.
But isn't this just, it sounds like this argument is effectively just a capitalistic argument. that, I mean, because if you think about it, from the standpoint of a capitalistic system, capitalists don't really care about, the kind of moral quandaries of sorts. Their job is to maximize their profit. And so if the government says, okay, we need security technology in order to oversee and control a certain population, a company will build it because the company cares about the profit. We need security cameras in order to check out each and every American, Palestinian, or whoever else. They will build it. Meaning they don't have the moral qualms associated with it. The company, if it's a security firm, is going to supply the security things. If it's to kill people, they're going to build the bombs, missiles, weapons, etc. They are going to build systems of control in regards to, for example, the first thing you mentioned was the First Amendment, that this notion of having these companies exert a certain amount of control over the way people think and the way people function in the larger globe. I mean, keep in mind, a few years ago, they ran with this idea that Trump was working with the Russians and that the Russians got Donald Trump elected. And for the next 3 years after, this mass psyop became one of the major parties' talking points that they effectively even bring up to this day. And even beyond that, unprovoked attack on Ukraine. This is after expanding to the Russian border and overthrowing the government of Ukraine. And yet this is what they pump out to their audience here and in Europe. I mean, we can go down the list, right? Everything started on October 7th, as if the last 70 years hadn't necessarily taken place. Like, meaning, I guess I'm agreeing with you. From a First Amendment standpoint, they have done everything in their power to control a narrative that they feel is slipping away from them. But I would push back on this front, though. Social media has been difficult for them to control. Hence, all of these measures that are coming into play. So even though I agree with you that corporate America or the political space has been trying to control speech and control the point of view, they have seemed to have been taking a lot of pains on this notion of that same social media because of divergent points of view in a way that mainstream media didn't necessarily have to deal with. Do you agree with that?
Right. Well, there's that classic line. Was it Lenin who said that the capitalist will sell you the rope with which you'll hang him? Right. That there are certain contradictions. I mean, I guess you might call it the Aikido of politics, right? And in Aikido, as opposed to other forms of martial arts, you take your opponent's sort of force and you redirect it, right? So they throw a punch at you, and you instead of punching them back, you take their hand and you lead the direction that they're heading, but you just do it in a different direction than they intended. And so that I think absolutely has to be part of our politics, is to say they've thrown all this stuff at us. If we try and throw stuff back at them, we're going to wear ourselves out. Take what they've thrown at us and redirect it in new directions. And I think that's really, and social media is part of that. There are ways we can redirect it. And it's going to be, I think the Trump administration is part of that. The Trump administration might be better than Harris administration, not because Trump is inherently honest or, fighting the deep state, but because there's some very good things about the Trump administration. First, the ugly face matches with the ugly body. So you're not deluded. He's going to be, it's going to show you what you're facing, and he's going to appoint people. He's already, nominating people who are just as ugly as what the system really is. So
these people are horrible. Yeah.
So but that's good, because otherwise you're going to have what you had in the Biden administration, the sort of like identity politics, sort of the velvet glove for the steel fist, right? Where you put like, a woman, a transgender, a African American, Hispanic, but they're Homeland Security. I mean, they're all Department of Defense, et cetera. So it's being used to mask reality. And the other
Why do you think Trump won, by the way? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That was the second question. I'm sorry I didn't answer.
No, you're perfectly fine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue with your thought.
So, of course, I'm not sure that I believe Trump won. I think the whole election system from the beginning was rigged. I mean, no serious candidates could rise, couldn't even be covered. And I know this from my own personal experience of trying to run, that we're totally blocked out. That if you talked about any serious, real issues, that you're basically blacklisted from the U.S. media, because U.S. media is controlled by banks, and that they get, Homeland Security classified directives that block things out. You just can't talk about them. So Trump did not win in an absolute sense. However, in the election itself, each state is different. And where Republicans controlled the state, they scrubbed out, a Democrat or progressive or other group, Green, whatever, aggressively. So the Republicans, where they controlled the local government in the United States, engaged in all sorts of fraud. There's no doubt about that. All sorts of illegal activities to disenfranchise people. Where the Democrats were powerful, they also did the same thing. But overall, I think the reason why Trump, quote unquote, won is that people who would normally show out to vote for the Democrat sort of instinctively, because their grandfather did it from his union days in the 1950s, whatever, those people, a lot of them stayed home. And in the case of the Arab Americans, Muslims, a lot of other groups who people sort of just assume would vote for Democrats, they were just so disgusted by this that they stayed home or even voted Green in some cases. And that if people thought there was a reason to vote for Harris and they had showed up, that Trump would not have won. And I totally agree with that position. I'm not endorsing Trump, but I think there's absolutely no reason to vote for Harris. And that, of course, puts me at odds with friends and family. I mean, essentially, I walked away from my entire cultural environment of people I went to school with, et cetera, because they almost without exception accept this myth that the Democratic Party represents some sort of progressive power, that Harris is going to. You were mentioning about abortion. I mean, that was the perfect example. And I think it was basically a political setup that the Republicans intentionally chose extremist policies on abortion, and the Democrats were intentionally constantly being brought up in the media as somehow the only force against these crazy Republicans, and that the whole thing was a kabuki show in order to get people to vote on the abortion issue and close their eyes to the drive for world war.
Well, to be fair, I think the Republican Party takes the position on abortion because they actually believe the position. Like, meaning, if you talk to some people, and when I did Fault Lines, I used to have one of my co-hosts used to be a Republican, Austin. He was very straightforward on this idea that, I don't believe in abortion. I don't think people should be having babies. And you have many Republicans that are like hardcore on this issue. I don't care if a woman is raped. I don't care about the situation. She should be forced to have that baby. Meaning, I guess I'm saying the Republican Party the media didn't highlight this for no reason. The Republican Party actively went after killing Roe v. Wade. Trump was put in with this idea that I'm going to put people on the bench that would kill Roe v. Wade. And so I remember when it first happened, and my thought was, okay, well, Democrats are going to obviously use this since Republicans overreached on this issue. And you can look at Trump. Donald Trump was under pressure the entire campaign on this issue of abortion because he understood that his position wasn't necessarily liked by the overwhelming majority of the public. Nikki Haley was the one that came out and gave this Republican position that was somewhat amenable to the larger public of, okay, well, yeah, women should have the right to do this. It needs to be X number of months, et cetera. So I don't think this was ginned up. I think this was a legitimate position of the Republican Party. Democrats took advantage, but it's like if you're thinking about, okay, I need to eat versus I need to have an abortion. Well, I need to eat is going to matter more. Or I need a better economy versus, whether I'm going to have an abortion. The abortion issue was specific to certain states. It wasn't even something that was nationwide. And even in Republican states, if they had a referendum, they would probably lose in that referendum on that issue. I guess I'm talking too much. What I'm saying is,
I appreciate you setting me straight on that point. And I I actually did not give a speech on abortion. I have spoken about it, but I have been thinking about writing on the issue because it is so divisive and it's used in such a divisive manner.
And Gypsy, I'm not trying to set you straight on it. I guess it was
it's important because I felt like candidates don't actually get into the real issues here about abortion. And I mean, the real issues, obviously, the Republican parties are against abortion, but they don't offer anything for a woman who wants to raise a child, as a single mother, right?
Yeah.
So if they were serious about trying to reduce the amount of abortion in America, and I would certainly support the idea that we should reduce the amount of abortion because it is dangerous. Abortion is not harmless. It can hurt you to have an abortion. And there are many women I've met who are sort of haunted, including some people very close to me, because the woman had to have an abortion when she was young and pregnant. And later in life, she sort of felt, what if I could have raised this baby? And if a system was set up where if a woman, a 16-year-old or 18-year-old or 25 got pregnant and she could get full care for 3 or 4 years to take care of her baby, I think some women would choose that. But it's not an option, and Republicans have been brutal in destroying any such option for women. So
it's
they're
wild,
forcing
right?
women to get abortions.
Because they want to force women to have a kid, and then the moment that they have the kid, you're on your own. And it's like, okay, that's
exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's like you can't have it both ways.
That's the I mean, I don't want to get into that because I don't think the Democrats are better. The Democrats are better only in that it serves them in highlighting their election the ambitions. I mean, but you saw what happened with the Democrats and the Republicans. And this is sort of classic. Harris and all these Democratic operatives, Bernie Sanders, whatever, saying if Trump is elected, it's going to be fascism.
The world is going to end. He's Hitler.
And then Trump wins, quote unquote. And the next day, they're out there kissing his royal ass. I mean, they were not taking some sort of stand against fascism. It was a total show.
Yeah.
I'm taking a stand against fascism. I'm saying I don't recognize this election. I don't recognize Donald Trump and a privatized government which serves, OpenAI, Google, Oracle, and Amazon is not a government. It doesn't represent us in any way, and that we should be prepared for. I mean, basically, with Workers' League, what I've been working with lately, and Green Liberty, you could say it's more on the left. I don't really like the term left and right, but we're left, in a real sense, right?
Yeah.
That we had, as opposed to this corrupt left, which has been promoted in the media and gets funding, which has been pro-COVID vaccine, has been buying into this growth. Consumption paradigm for the economy, which has been unwilling to criticize the Democrats and especially the sort of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, who are the sort of like this progressive face on a totalitarian system. That this sort of fake and also who have embraced the transgender identity politics agenda, right, and downplayed class issues in favor of identity politics. That
right there, so true.
So this is what where we'd like to go with Workers' League and Green Liberty.
So it sounds a bit like Chris Hedges when he talks about corporate totalitarianism. That
absolutely right. Although Chris Hedges he avoids a lot of serious issues. I'd love to talk about Chris Hedges because I have written on the topic. And of course, I tried to contact Chris Hedges on several occasions and I was unable to do so. But he gets it right. He gets it right, but he will not talk about 9/11. He will not talk about the Federal Reserve and how money is counterfeited. He will not talk about what the COVID operation was really about. And he will not talk about the concrete the real way in which specific corporations and international banks control American politics. So he avoids the core, right? I mean, it's sort of like saying, let's talk about all the way that, that corporations are unfair to working people and how things are rigged up. And he does it in a very, very sophisticated way. And I really appreciate it. I learned a lot from him. But he says, but let's forget about state crimes. It's too complicated. It'll get in the way of my, I mean, from my perspective, that's how it sounds like to me, because I take on state crime, straight on, no joke. And what happens to me? I'm out of the country for 15 years and I can't appear in the media anyway.
Let me ask you this.
Chris Hedges, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, how would you unravel that? I mean, we have about 4 minutes left. How would you unravel that? Because you're going directly at this kind of interplay between the capitalistic system and corporate America. And corporate America in this context being the way software companies, let's say like Google, Microsoft, et cetera, the way the control and leverage that they have in our, not just political system, but even in the media space. I mean, Google is like 70%. Education also. I mean, when people look stuff up, they're looking stuff up online. How would you go about making that, I guess, more democratic, under the control more so of the state? How would you even go about doing that, considering the way it's integrated so far into our current system?
Right. Well, I certainly can't answer that in 3 minutes.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. But we can give it a couple of hints as to what direction. And I think there are two sides to it. On the one side, we take what there is and we use it to have a real discussion about real issues and to engage people in an inclusive way. So it's not Chris Hedges lecturing to you, but all of us coming together to discuss things and trade, support each other. On the other hand, there also, I think, needs to be more of a sort of Amish Mennonite type attitude to say, we're going to create our own local economy, right? We're going to support ourselves as much as we possibly can in our own neighborhood and be independent of these multinationals. And if necessary, and it might be necessary because things are that bad, make our own currency for ourselves, supply our own food to the best of our ability, make our own tools, furniture, whatever ourselves, be totally independent, because our dependency every day means, you buy a phone, you buy, something at the shopping mall, whatever. 50% of that money or more is going to multinational banks and to the billionaires behind it, because they take a cut of everything. But if you made it yourself and you help each other, then the money stays with you, with your friends.
But do you see the public as being willing to do that? Meaning,
I think it's going to have to be a lot more painful before people get there. Yeah.
But do you see that pain? I guess what I'm asking is, let's say it does get more painful. Let's say it is to the situation where people are struggling. Let's say inflation goes to some ridiculous amount or something like that. Do you really see the country or the public regressing to the point where it's creating its own tools? Meaning, do you see it meaning, have we gotten to the point as a society technologically with a certain amount of sophistication that even if there was pain, that the change to that pain would be more control over those devices, not necessarily making their own device? Does that make sense?
Right. Well, I think in the case of the Trump administration, many people supported Trump thinking it was going to bring some sort of change. And now he's installing, the most regressive, most dangerous administration in history. Although I understand why people would want to support Trump. So the answer is specific. I mean, I would like to get into the longshoremen's strike, right, against automation, and it's a large degree about the trade system, how we're made dependent. And that I think was extremely important. The strikes against the longshoremen and also against Boeing. This was striking at the heart of things, the military industrial complex and the trade production distribution complex, which are what control our entire economy. And it was basically totally blocked out of the election. It didn't even come up as an issue. But that is the potential, right? I mean, I would say if you have to say where will we go, is if we could get those people striking at Boeing and the longshoremen striking against the shipping and logistics and global finance, and get them a little bit more sort of political awareness, more strategy, and together with our movements and other movements, then we can scale up to 100,000, 500,000 committed people who are taking the system on, grabbing the bull by the horns, as it were. But it's rough. I mean, you have to be willing to pay a price, even if you're not, arrested or thrown out of the country or killed. There's still going to be a serious economic and social price for taking that stand. And I was going to answer you honestly what you said, Jamal, and that is that I think it's going to have to be more painful before people get to that. But I think we will get there.
See, that's the rub with the longshoremen strike. And I'm glad you brought that up. One of the items that they wanted was basically to pull back on this idea of technological innovation.
Right.
Because what they realized was that they are effectively fighting machines. Like in one industry after the next. I was a software engineer for about 10 years. And some of the systems that we used to build effectively eliminated the need for human beings to be in those systems because human beings were less efficient than what the software could do. So the one morning, there was a process where every morning the people would come in, they would read through this long list, they would pick out people who they're supposed to contact. It's like this is a manual process that machines do extraordinarily well. And so I remember building a system for these people to be able to do it as soon as they walk in, it's done. And not just done, even give them the layout for the next day or for the next hour and do that all day. And so 2 or 3 people that used to do that in the morning are no longer necessary for that process. And if you think of that taking place all throughout society, where Uber, Lyft, all of these cars, all over the place, all of these things are going to be replaced, or these human beings.
And these are all owned by basically the same groups, the same financial.
Exactly. So it's like at some point, I used to point out that at some point society is going to have to confront this idea that we are changing so far technologically that human beings are going to be far less necessary in many of these industries. And what is society going to do? Meaning, what is the political space going to do to find a way to integrate these people into additional jobs, or for that matter, get revenue from the machines that are now doing those jobs? And up to this point, we are completely incapable of even dealing with that question. That question doesn't even come up. It's astonishing to me that it doesn't come up.
Well, we have, unfortunately, a bunch of prostituted intellectuals, and I say that with full respect for people who are forced into sexual labor, who are not as bad as these guys, who are making this argument that it's an imperative that like somehow God or nature or science compels us to move in this direction, and they leave out of the argument some fundamental points, and that is that these automated or digitalized systems, they require energy, which is of course not free and affects us, our environment and our economy, and it makes it weaker and more fragile. If there's no energy, it's gone, right? And that there's some intentionality there. And they also leaving out people, that growth and stock market is not how we should determine our economy, but rather the welfare of the people. This should be our standard. And also that it affects people's ability to think, that dependency on Oracle's run programs or Wikipedia or Google, whatever, affects the ability of people to think deeply, and that it's healthier to do things with your hands, to write by hand, to read books, etc. And that this sort of online network thing, it has its value in, let's say 25% of the economy or 20% of the economy, and that would be okay. But there's lots of our lives in which raising, planting your own food, building something with your hands, playing with your kids, making things out of Lego or blocks. This is what human life is about. This is how we've lived for the last 3 million years or longer, and that to lose that is a it's a spiritual sort of attack on who we are, on our identity, our subjectivity, and that is no accident. That the bottom line there is that the multinational banks and trusts and the billionaires behind them, the thing that they hate the most is people who can organize meaningful resistance. And meaningful resistance would be it's informed in a philosophical sense. It has a historical sort of understanding of history and of the future and what's possible, and it's participatory, i.e., you or I don't just lecture people. We say, and come join us at Green Liberty or join us at Workers League, and we'll stand with you. You have a problem, come to us. We'll try and help you. We'll build cooperatives supporting communities. And that is what they don't want you to do. They'll give you a Bernie Sanders type, or they'll give you a Chris Hedges. But Chris Hedges, there's nowhere you can call him up. There's no group you can join. There's no one in your neighbor. You can't go to the local Chris Hedges, office in your neighborhood and talk about how to get a job or what to do with your children. There's no organization with weekly meetings. And so that's what we're missing.
Community, effectively community, this ability to get together and organize.
These parties, we're moving, we're trying, but none of the parties, including the Green Party or others, alternative parties, none of them actually have these. Some of them have local meetings, although most of them do not. But none of them say, join our cooperative and we'll scale up. And once we get to 1,000 people, right, I'll babysit for your family for 4 hours. You'll give me 3 kilos of potatoes or whatever. And guess what? We're independent. And that we had this with the Democratic Party especially, but the Greens were guilty of this too. They were like, we're going to go to renewable energy, windmills or solar panels. And guess what? They're all being run by corporations, and you have to buy it from them, right? It's like, give me a break. In renewable energy is you put a windmill on your house or solar panel, and you supply your own energy. If you have some left over, you sell it to your neighbor, and you don't pay a penny to any multinational corporations or banks at all. And this is what the Green Party and the Democratic Party all fell on their face. And I think the reason they fell on their face is back to the issue, money. You want to run a campaign, you got to get upper middle class people at the minimum who are willing to give you $5,000, $10,000, whatever, in contributions. If you start to say something in your campaign like, we should produce our own energy and our own food and create our own banks, right? That none of those sort of think left, live right, upper middle class intellectuals are going to give you a penny because they feel directly threatened at any move towards economic and intellectual independence.
Emanuel Pastreich. What's said it last name one more time? I'm sorry.
I say Reich, like SH, but anything's okay.
Emanuel Pastreich. He is an independent candidate for president of the United States. He has a PhD from Harvard University and author of 12 books, many on Southeast Asian history and politics. Emanuel is currently director of the Earth Management Institute and director of the Asia Institute in Seoul. Emanuel, where can people find you?
Oh, so my website is emmanuelpastreich24.org, and all my speeches are there. But you can also, if you go to Global Research, which is one of the big newspapers, you can just check my name, and it has most of my recent articles and speeches.
Very cool, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. All right, I'm going to take a break. If you guys dig the content, give it a like. Share the content, subscribe to this channel. My objective is to get to 40,000 by the end of the year. I need your help to do that, so share it far and wide. If you really dig the content, and you want to support this content, you can do so through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats or Sticker, whichever one you want to call them. All will be read before the end of the show. I thought Glenn Deason will be on, but he has not responded to me. We've been going back and forth. He's been rather busy. He's been flying around the globe at the various conferences. I really hope he joins me, if not today, at the very least tomorrow. So I'm going to take a quick break. Like, share it, subscribe to it. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. We're coming to the last, let's say, segment of this particular show. I want to thank all of you for joining me. If you dig the content, give it a like, share it, subscribe to it. If you can help Kamala Harris out and you feel the need to do so, you can do so. She is begging for money at this point. Yes, she received $1 billion, but apparently that $1 billion did not necessarily do her all that well. The Harris Fund, $50. That is the donation we're asking you to make for the Harris Fight Fund program today. Now, the reason that Kamala Harris is asking for money is because Kamala Harris spent $1 billion. She raised $1 billion in 3 months, spent $1 billion in 3 months. Apparently, there was around $20 million spent on Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, and many of the musical acts. She had to give Oprah Winfrey $1 million in order to have the town hall. Apparently, some of the checks bounced to some musical artists, at the very least, Alanis Morissette. She paid $450,000 a day to put her face on the big sphere in Las Vegas. She paid 6 figures in order to put her name over football games. She apparently paid several $1 million to give to influencers. None of it worked. None of it worked. Not just none of it worked, she left the campaign $20 million in debt. To make this worse and get across the level of this loss, Kamala Harris even lost women right here. Vice President Harris' strategy of riding on a surge of female support ultimately fell flat, with hints that Election Day could see a historic gender gap failing to materialize. White women sided with President-elect Trump for the third straight cycle, and he made inroads with Latino voters and young women. Trump improved his 2020 margins with Latino women by 8 points, according to the Edison research. Among young women, Trump improved by 11 points compared to the last cycle, according to NBC News exit polling. Here's another one. In regards to the youth vote, Kamala Harris had the worst performance since John Kerry. Harris was able to get plus 12 in the youth vote, but this is compared to 24, plus 24 for Biden, plus 19 for Hillary Clinton, who lost and still got a plus 19 in the youth vote. Obama, plus 23. Obama, plus 34 the first time around in the youth vote. John Kerry, plus 9. Kamala Harris, plus 12. A horrible showing in regards to the youth vote. Here's another one. What did people care about? On immigration, the people who cared about immigration, 90% voted for Trump, 9% voted for Harris. This is why arguing her going to the border made absolutely no sense. There was no way you were going to change people's opinion of you on the issue of the border. So going to the border and claiming to be tough on the border doesn't do anything but alienate your base. For whatever reason, she did not know that. The economy, 80% voted for Trump on the economy, as opposed to Kamala Harris. 57% voted for Trump on the issue of foreign policy. 37% voted for Kamala Harris. You get the issues of abortion, Harris, 74%. But again, how many people are voting for that? State of democracy, 80%. But again, considering Donald Trump won, how many people ultimately ended up voting for that? The point that I want to make is whether Donald Trump fulfills what he says he is going to fulfill or not is almost secondary to the point that Trump ran on certain issues. So say for the moment that Donald Trump is what he said he was, meaning let's assume for the moment, which I don't believe, by the way, but let's assume for the moment that what Trump says is what he actually is. So when Trump says we need to stop these wars, I'm going to end wars, not start them. That was a pitch that he made during the campaign. I'm going to end the Ukraine war. Again, a pitch he made during the campaign. Kamala Harris' response to that was, well, he's going to try to end the war. He's just going to give it all to Putin. He's just going to give it all to Putin. He talks to dictators. He goes and talks to dictators. So this ended up being one of the main fighting points within the context of the race. Well, 57% of those people preferred Trump on the issue of foreign policy. So what does it mean for the orthodoxy that Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party, and many of the Republican Party stand for? Meaning when they're standing arm in arm and they are deriding Trump on this issue. Now, keep in mind, when you're deriding somebody, you're deriding them from a position of strength. I am in the lead position. I'm in the primary position in this. The public agrees with me on this, so I can deride you from a position of strength. And yet, when the public weighed both, they found the orthodoxy lacking on this issue and went to Trump. Now, again, I'm going with this idea for the moment that Trump is what he say he is and that the public voted on those terms. And I'm pointing out that the orthodox point of view failed. The establishment point of view failed. This idea that we can't talk to Kim Jong-un, we can't make peace in Ukraine, we can't deal with people around the world from this, if they're not our vassals. The Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party took this fundamental stance that yes, the American public is okay with us giving gobs of money to Ukraine, while that same American public was asking for bridges, was asking for help in regards to paying for their bills, in regards to housing and everything else, drowning in medical debt, drowning in debt in general. And instead of dealing with that, and the pain, by the way, that was caused especially during all of the inflation that went on for years, they decided that their focus was going to be on Ukraine and Israel. The Israel thing is a big deal also. And I would put to you that part of the reason that Harris got so little of the youth vote was because of Israel and Palestine, right? I mean, who was out on the campus angry, yelling, calling them Genocide Joe? That was the youth vote. The very vote that didn't show up for Harris. The very vote that didn't show up for Harris. They are blaming progressives. They're trying to say that this is the fault of progressives, that we've gone too far, that the left has too much of a stranglehold of the Democratic Party. These people are out of their goddamn minds. Joe Scarborough went on a bitch fest. I don't know another word for it. A Republican, by the way, Republican, Joe Scarborough on MSNBC turned around and said, these damn lefties, they are taking over the party and we need to do something about it. This is Joe Scarborough. If it will play, come on, play for me.
Campus safely, defunding the police. Back in 2020, we were talking here, Reverend Al, let me bring you in here on defunding the police. You and I were talking about how representatives in the toughest parts of New York City in real time were saying, defund the police. No. We need more police on the street protecting our children as we walk to school. We need more children in the classroom. In the classrooms, more police officers, safety officers, so our children can go to and from class, so our businesses can be safe, so we can live a safe life. And it's something, again, you have a great line about wokeness and limousine liberals and everything. But I just wanted to say this is what we've known since 2017 and what you and I have talked about, that white elitists that run the Democratic Party are far to the left of many Black and Hispanic voters in the Democratic Party. And I remember a pollster for Barack Obama, I think his name is David Sachs, forgive me for, came out and had that poll in 2017, and he got absolutely hammered on Twitter. Absolutely hammered by the far left. How dare you say this? How dare you?
What the hell are you talking about? What the hell are you talking about? White liberals? What the hell are you talking about? Who the hell ran on defund the police? Who ran on that? What are they talking about? Kamala Harris ran as a tough prosecutor. I am a prosecutor. I'm going to prosecute this case. That's what she said. She said it over and over again because they said Donald Trump was a criminal and you needed a prosecutor to prosecute the case against a criminal. She said I was tough on transatlantic gangs. That was her argument. Who the hell was talking about defund the police? And what does that have to do with Kamala Harris losing? What? What are you talking about? Kamala Harris ran on, I'm tough on the border. I have fought transatlantic gangs. She ran around with Liz Cheney. She's going to be tough on Gaza because she's not changing policy on the Gaza conflict. She is going to be an interventionist because she was going to continue to give money and support to Ukraine to continue that war. That was her ticket. That is what she ran on. She didn't run on Medicare for all. She didn't run on expansion of Social Security. She didn't run on a guaranteed job or an increase in the minimum wage. She didn't run on those things. Those were lefty positions. She did not run on. She did not touch. She did not talk about. Every so often when she realized, oh my God, I'm losing Black men. And then out the blue, she came up with a Black plan that nobody gave her credit for because nobody believed it. And then she had a Hispanic plan. And of course, that was basically legalizing or giving a pathway to millions of people who were in the country illegally, or for that matter, the Dreamers. She had, what's the other one? There was no Arab plan because those people were being slaughtered by her administration. I'm pointing out that Kamala Harris ran to get Republicans that were disaffected with Trump. And she was using Liz Cheney as that conduit to get those disaffected Republicans. Now think of how ridiculous this is. Usually political campaigns work to pull out their base first and foremost, meaning I need to get all of the people that would typically vote for me out to the polls. That's what I need to do. And if I could get additional Republicans or something like that, fair enough. But that's secondary to getting my base out to the polls. Because at the end of the day, the person who turns out their base is the one that has the best chance of winning. Kamala Harris decided my base is going to be with me regardless. So I don't really need to cater or go after them. What I need to do is go after disaffected Republicans. And so, yes, I'm going to maintain the same policy on Gaza that Joe Biden is doing, that people are calling him Genocide Joe, and that these people, these kids, these same kids that would typically vote Democrat are out there agitating, saying we need to stop this genocide. I'm not going to throw them a bone. I'm not going to change my language. I'm going to be a supporter of Israel all the way through. Okay, so you basically told them to F off. You told them to F off. I'm running around the country with Liz Cheney, and I'm going to keep these wars going because Liz Cheney and I agree on this kind of interventionist America that shakes its fist to the world. Okay, fair enough. Anybody that wants to stop these wars and believe that you're whistling past the graveyard, again, these people tend to be on the left, some of which tend to be on the right. You've told them to F off. I'm trying to point out that you've isolated many of the groups that you would have need to come out and vote for you. You're not talking about an increase to the minimum wage. You're not talking about an increase to Social Security. You're not talking about free education or paying off student loans. Again, these are lefty policies. What is your vision for this country? Full stop. And the reality of it is going around telling people, well, when I was a middle-class kid, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is when my relatives get old, will there be something that keeps them intact? Full stop. When my grandmother got older and when my grandmother got ill, we had to do that as a family on our own. My mom leveraged all of her time and energy, just like she did with me when I got sick, exhausting herself to ensure that I was intact. And she had to do the same thing to my grandmother. What I mean by that is there was no government assistance or help. Those are things that families are stuck with on their own. And you're talking about families that are not necessarily all that financially well-to-do. And so they have to figure out how to do it on their own. I'm saying that shouldn't be the case. The idea that somebody works 60, 70 years of their energy, their livelihoods, they invest everything into this country, and then when they get older, the country tells them to F off. I'm pointing out that where in the hell is the Democratic Party on these issues? And I'm saying Kamala Harris was nowhere on these issues. Even this notion of expanding Social Security. You can eliminate the cap that is there for the rich and expand the benefits of Social Security, expand Medicare to cover things like dental work or vision care. You can do that stuff. You can advocate for that stuff. You can create a vision as you move forward to say, this is what the Democratic Party stands for. But you didn't do that. Instead, we're going to go around the country with Liz Cheney. I'm going to reach out to disaffected Republicans. Even this was stupid on its face. Liz Cheney got beat by like 50 points in that race. Donald Trump had the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party. So you were reaching out to a few percentage points of the Republican Party while ignoring your base. And yet, Joanne Reed would say, Kamala Harris ran a perfect campaign. And the only issue was these racist, sexist, Hispanics, and Black people. Otherwise, she was flawless. Flawless. Was it really flawless? Was it really the white liberals? Was it really the blacks? Was it really the Republicans? Meaning, how many people can you blame with the exception of accepting you had a bad candidate with a bad strategy, with a party that is fundamentally elitist, that no longer has the thread of representing the interests of working class and the poor? Your issue is that. Stop blaming voters for your candidate's inability to get people to vote for that candidate. It is the job of the candidate, first and foremost. It is the job of a party, first and foremost, to be able to win, to be able to create a coalition that can go out there, get those votes, and accomplish an objective. You must understand, government is just a conceptual device. It's just a tool. It's no different than a hammer. It's no different than a nail. It's no different than any other tool that you come up with the exception that is a conceptual device. It is something in our heads. It's something that we organize around. It's energy organized, manifests into physical form to accomplish certain objectives for a larger population. Meaning, it's a tool of organization for the public to be able to say, this is what we want to do. And we've organized our energies in a way to accomplish a particular task. Now, if your ruling coalition cannot come up with a vision, a plan, an argument in order to affect that particular task, meaning it needs to be worthwhile and useful for the public to be able to sign on to, it says, yes, that's what we want to do. That's where we want to go. That's the direction that we're trying to take this country. And yeah, we'll sign on to that because we believe, A, that you could do that, and B, that is the vision and the right way that we should be going. Now, if the Democratic Party can't do that, then you can't blame voters for not signing on. And if you're doing things to alienate your voting base, you can't blame voters for not signing on. If you are paying for, politically backing a genocide in real terms that we can watch with our own eyes, with people being slaughtered en masse, then again, you can't blame voters for not signing on to that. I'm saying in one situation after the next, the way the Democratic Party, or for that matter, the way Kamala Harris ran this race, was absurd. And that level of absurdity lost. And instead of them accepting, okay, we need to change. Something we're doing is alienating voters. Something we're doing is alienating our base. Something we're doing is not enticing to the American public. We need to change. They don't seem to be coming to that assessment. Instead, they seem to be blaming any and everybody except pointing the blame where it belongs, which is with themselves. It is not the responsibility of voters to put you in office. You do not own Green Party voters. You do not own voters in general. It is the weirdest thing that for whatever particular reason, the Democratic Party seems to believe that everybody should just vote for them without them offering anything for that vote. It is utterly and entirely bizarre. And I really think the cultish behavior that these guys have around this particular front has not served them all that well. And I would argue it's not serving them all that well now, and coming to some kind of honest assessment, some introspection, something, an autopsy, something where they can come to some kind of assessment. Okay, we got this wrong. We've gone too far in a particular direction. I would point to one last thing. The way you fund your campaigns. I disagree with a lot of what Emanuel said, if I'm being bluntly honest with you. Partially because I don't necessarily believe the American public is going to be willing to go backwards in regards to the way technology is going. It's going in a particular direction. And I think it's going in a particular direction, not out of some kind of magic, but because human beings tend to try to make things better. How can we make this product better? How can we improve upon this particular product? Even if there was no capitalistic system, people would still make, something to do X and to improve upon that particular thing, especially if you get a government around where the government requires X and Y, to make things, to build things, to get energy out of things, and to make the process faster, more streamlined, and even just basic human ingenuity is going to want to make a product better. All right. We fund our systems through cash. And because we fund our systems through cash, Republicans representing the 1%, there is no contradiction in Republicans in the way that they operate. The Democratic Party has a different mandate. Their mandate on some level is to be this kind of escape valve for the capitalistic system, meaning the worst edges of the capitalistic system needs to somehow be ameliorated. And the Democratic Party, or the leftist party in a country, is supposed to be the thing that softens those edges. How can we ensure that people have healthcare? How can we ensure that people have education? How can we ensure that people, when they get old, are taken care of? How do we make sure that the elderly are not crawling on the streets, or that cancer patients have the ability to get some kind of healthcare? How do we ensure these things? That is a responsibility of the Democratic Party. Full stop. Republican Party doesn't care. So if you get a Democratic Party that can no longer do that, and can no longer do it in a credible, honest to God way, where the American public believes that there's something out there fighting for their interests, then you're going to lose those votes. And maybe you should lose those votes. You have a finance system or economic system in regards to the political space that requires cash to get from point A to point B. That is our system. If you're a Democrat and you have to beg the rich for money, then part of the begging the rich for that money is to explain what you're going to do. The moment that you go and say, well, I want to do Medicare for all, and I want to increase taxes on people like you, and I want to use that money to expand Social Security, expand Medicare. Hell, I may even want to put a tax on the stock market and the way the stock market is used. They're going to look at you and tell you, go F yourself. They are. They're going to say, A, we don't want unions. B, we already have healthcare. We don't need that. C, we don't need Social Security when we get old because we can afford that. D, education is nice, but we want education up to the point where they can just be workers. Meaning those are not concerns of the people who you are going to get the money. So Democrats become watered down, milquetoast. They would talk a big game in public, as Hillary Clinton said, have a public and private conversations. And they would tell you, all right, we're going to do X and Y, and that's what we're going to do. That's the best that we can do. And they go to the public, and they tell the public, all right, we are going to do $5,000 tax credit. And the public looks and says, okay, that's it. That's what we're going to do. Now, if you had a different funding set, meaning if you had small dollar donations, like Sanders, where Sanders was like, I am coming up with a new funding model in order for me to run this contest. And he came up with that funding model because he understood that it was impossible for him to run on Medicare for all, expanding Social Security, increasing the minimum wage, and get money from the exact same people that don't want those things. Now, the Democratic Party runs using money from those people. Kamala Harris raised over $1 billion. Where do you get the money from? Right? Where do you get the money from? Who's giving you the money? And the moment that you get the money, what are the constraints that are placed upon what you can push for, what you can argue for, what you can represent, the moment that the money exchanges hands? The issue is there. You are paid to take certain positions. You're paid to not take certain positions. And the Democratic Party, despite its philosophical mandate, is constrained by the funding method that it uses in order to operate and run those races. Until that changes, nothing changes. And blaming progressives, despite the fact that she didn't run a progressive campaign, is outlandish. They would bring up stuff like trans kids, but I would argue that trans kids is not a lefty issue. Meaning there's a difference between what they're considering to be a populist economic left that wants an expansion of Social Security, an expansion of Medicare, paid for college, meaning regardless of who you are, you could be dirt poor and still go to college if that is indeed what you want to do. If you want to go to 2 year, you can do 2 year. If you want to go to technical college, you can go to technical college. Meaning, I want a system where the main costs that people are stuck dealing with are covered. Meaning, your healthcare is covered, your education is covered. I want to be able to unlock the economic potential of each, not just economic, but the potential in general of each and every person in this country. And typically the way that is done through education and allowing people to go to school for free would do that. That would be an economic boom. Think of the businesses that could be created. Think of the ability of people to educate and learn and get better in this kind of global economy. We could do that. Richest country in the world. We spend $1 trillion on military. And yet $300 billion to Ukraine, billions to Israel. And yet when it comes to the American public of saying, hey, well, can we get healthcare for our citizens? We can't afford it. What about paying off college? Can't afford it. What about expanding Social Security? Can't afford it. When it comes to something for the public, we can't afford it. When it comes to foreign wars, bam, money out of thin air. We spent $10 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan. If we did not fight those wars, do you think they would have spent that $10 trillion here? It's aggravating. Stop blaming progressives for your own failures. That's my main point. Fuzzy ball. Let's go to things. The only reason they're ending the Ukraine war is because they need to prepare for upcoming inevitable Taiwan false flag event and the United States having to defend Taiwan. I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, by the way, but I hope you're wrong. I mean, they've been doing the salami slice for Taiwan for years at this point, where they said, we believe in the one China policy, while putting a bunch of money, weapons, guns, ammo, and troops in Taiwan. So you could be entirely right, but I hope you're wrong. That is effectively a nuclear war. Hey, just sending support. Social emotional learning with Dr. Donnie. Well, thank you, Dr. Donnie. I appreciate it. Let's keep going. You can vote blue or red. Foreign policy is bipartisan. Nothing will fundamentally change in that aspect. President Jafar. President Jafar with the neocons that are bringing into the administration, doesn't seem like much is changing. But for people who are flipping out about this, and I guess I'm one of them, because I think it's, these people are insane. Is there really a difference between Antony Blinken and Marco Rubio? Let's be honest, is there? I mean, Antony Blinken, Zionist, not that bright, neocon, was pushing for a larger war in Ukraine, had no issue with the murder of women and children in Israel. Hell, Israel could have slaughtered 2 million Palestinians. Blinken would have been perfectly okay with it, especially the framing of the argument where Hamas is responsible for any atrocity that Israel creates. So it's easy at that point to basically accept whatever Israel does. It's the logic to which they were operating under. Just because two people are having an argument doesn't necessarily mean the argument is legitimate. It just makes it look like there's an argument to be had. And using, well, hey, there are human shields everywhere. So, anybody who they kill, it's fair game. I guess I'm pointing out that the position of Marco Rubio is not that different from the position of Antony Blinken, John Kirby, or Matthew Miller. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Yeah, they're creatures, but these are the same type of creatures. Let's keep going. More annoying, Sonny Hostin or Anna Navarro. Sonny Hostin is very annoying, but Anna Navarro, all of them are annoying, really. And none of them are accepting fault or blame. It's just outrageous. Is her name Kamala or Kamala? I voted for Sinwar. Oh, I say voted for Sinwar. Apparently, I was told, Lauren Steiner told me I was getting her name wrong. Kamala. I think it's Kamala. I could be wrong. Luca Clemente. Here's a super chat for you to complete with Jamarilisms, meaning you will now have more money to spend in physical matter reality. That is a flat fact. Thank you, Luca. I appreciate that. What is this? Come on. Dan Thomas, my 2 cents. Thank you for that. That's my mama helping out. Fuzzy Balls, Obama sold away the Democratic Party to Wall Street. 70% of the wealth in America belongs to Democrats, although, nice diatribe, 70% of wealth in America. Obama, did he sell them out? I mean, keep in mind, under Bill Clinton, so when Bill Clinton ran against, George Bush? Bill Clinton, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, was the first Democrat to outspend a Republican or to make more money than a Republican. Like, Bill Clinton went along with this notion of triangulation, looking at the left saying, you have nowhere else to go but to vote for me. I would argue that became somewhat of a pattern. Like, what the Democratic Party effectively thought to themselves, well, the left is going to be with us because Republicans are horrible. So we don't really have to cater to the left per se, because the left has nowhere else to go. So they are trapped in voting for us. So we can just make gains in other areas. And do you remember when Chuck Schumer gave that speech effectively saying, well, for every progressive that we lose, we can get a Republican in Ohio, something to that effect. Well, that is Kamala Harris' strategy, right? The lefties are going to vote for me either way. And so I need to get these Republicans that don't like Donald Trump. And from that, I can have a winning coalition. Okay, well, that was wrong. That was wrong. That didn't work. That didn't work. So, yeah, there's that. Kamala. Kamala is right. All right. We have come to the end of the show. Guys, I want to thank all of you. Wait, y'all forgot adoption plus population is declining. So that's why they're minimizing the use of abortion. But the population always declines in wealthier countries. People stop having kids. It's like kids are expensive. Yeah, Lawrence O'Donnell said it best about Democrats. That's why FBA stayed at House facts over emotions. Yeah, you heard Lawrence O'Donnell. He was like, if you want the Democratic Party to listen to you, stop voting for him. He was like, he says the reason that the left is ignored is because they know that the left is nowhere else to go. Lawrence O'Donnell is absolutely right. He's perfectly right. The reason that you're ignored is because they assume that they already have you. The reason that they ignore African-American votes is because 90% of blacks vote Democrat and they believe that they're a captured component. When Joe Biden was talking to the Breakfast Club and he was like, if you ain't black, I mean, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Think about the level of hubris and not elitism, this idea that you are owed, or this idea that the black population belongs to the Democratic Party in some way. It's almost like they're entitled to the black vote. So much so where a man, white man, could get on stage in a microphone and say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. I don't think that was a gaffe. I think that's what he really believes. And I think that's what Democrats in general really believe. And so when the black vote lessens and you get 25% of black men going to Republicans, they're shocked by the whole thing. Oh my God. Truth is, though, if you keep losing elements of your base, the youth vote, women vote, African-American vote, even by small margins, you effectively become a party that has an inability to win. For the first time since 2004, a Republican won the popular vote. A Republican who they believe had so many deficits that it would A, be impossible for another Republican to win the popular vote, but B, that demographically, the Democrats was going to have a majority going into the future. And maybe they lean too heavily on this idea that we are going to be mathematically and demographically dominant forever. The American public has shown that to be false. Now, from here on out, we're stuck with this idea of a wild card that can go either way, either bringing the world to some level of peace or bringing the world to some level of nuclear war. I have no idea which one Trump is going to do. It terrifies me But if I'm being honest with you, I was terrified every bit as much with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, considering what they were doing in those various countries. You realize if Joe Biden made the agreement to fire missiles into Russia, which he could have done, which Blinken wanted to do, which many in Europe wanted to do, we will be at war with Russia right now, a hot war with Russia right now. One decision away from nuclear war. If Donald Trump is going into office and believing he has some leverage in Russia that he does not have, he has no potential to win a conventional war on the ground in Europe. Europe has no potential to win a conventional war against Russia, in which case we once again are back to this notion of whistling past the graveyard, part of a nuclear war because of the hubris of the President of the United States. That hubris is shared between the Republican and the Democratic Party. Both function on that same model. Now, if that model is going to operate either in Iran, or for that matter, if that model is going to operate in Ukraine, or if that model is going to operate in China, we are all fucked. We're all fucked. Stay tuned. I'm going to say like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all. You all have a fantastic day.